Yeah, the metro's about, I don't know, 2 blocks away, but it runs parallel to my street. So it's far enough away. I didn't think it was going to be any issue for me, but it wakes me up. Like if I go to bed early, it wakes me up at like 12:30. And then either way, it wakes me up around 4:45 or so, just from the rumbling. There's enough coming through my single paned windows. So yet again, Jen, a knock against public transit. If this were private, it'd probably be quieter. But as it is, I'm going to get some plexiglass, I think, and cut it, and then basically double pane my windows myself.
I think you just need to move further away and stop being one of the poors who lives near public transportation. Good call.
You know, that's a good point. I'll just hermit crab my way over to southern Fairfax County But here's the problem, though. It is partially poverty, Jen, that makes me live near the metro. But largely, it's on account of I don't want to have to drive into Washington, D.C. with my car. Washington, D.C. is literally designed not to ferry goods and services efficiently. It's designed to thwart invading British troops. That's why there's all these big circles in DC. They were created so that they would have a 360 turn radius for cannons. That's why they're there. They had nothing to do with roads. They just converted them into roads when they were like, I don't think the British are going to invade again. So anyway, I wanted to live near a metro for that reason. So it's kind of, how am I going to square that circle until I get a butler driver, a butler driver. Or for some kind of cheap automated service.
Yeah. It feels like you are in constant search of this Goldilocks zone where you are far enough away from things where you can be comfortable, but yet close enough to things so you don't go crazy, but also in a 5-degree range of temperature that, like an orchid, if you fall out of, you begin wilting and dying.
Yeah, that's true. You know, with somebody as unique and wonderful, some would say genius, as me, Justin, there's just a lot of constraints that underhumans don't have to deal with.
Yeah.
Underhumans.
That's a good rationalization. That's a good way to, that's a good little box to put that in and say, let's never think of this again.
How are you, Justin?
Good. I've started working out again. And I'll tell you this, Jen actually said something that's been rattling around in my head that, like, she's been in very good shape and less good shape. But the one thing that you always just need to know is, like, you can't just let the workout pump go dry, because building it back up from scratch is the worst. And it's the reason why people don't get in shape, is because when you start to get in shape, it sucks. It's bad. It's hard to go. It's hard to get altitude where you're just used to doing it. The endorphins, it's part of your life. It's part of your day. You start to rely on it. There are pulls that make you do it. And the good news is that I know that on the other end of this is what I want, which is that I feel better. I look at the scale and I like the numbers that I see. I feel the adrenaline in the places where I want to. I go to sleep easier. But holy crap, at the age in your early 40s, those first few, like, I'm going about 2/3 of the speed that I would normally run. Like, I am, like, crippled. It is the worst. My hamstrings are tighter than tighter than a suspension bridge, and it is a pain in the butt to get back up to speed.
Feeling the burn, huh?
I'm feeling old. That's what I'm feeling. The burn I love. The burn makes me feel like I'm doing something. The burn makes me happy that I got up and worked out. It is the day after when I'm like, oh, everything is very, very, very tight. Everything is very.
You want to get back into the routine, but you can't walk for 4 days. So it's makes it harder.
The problem is, and this is something that, like, you only realize once you've done it before, is, like, no, the only thing that will make me feel better is running. Like that's the only thing that will make me feel better. Because like the problem isn't that you hurt. The problem is that you're not loose. And so you have to go get loose again. And you have to just condition your body to know this is a part of life. This is going to happen on a regular basis. Because right now my body's like, wah, we're under attack. Like recover for a month. It's like, no, calm down. It's fine. We'll be okay. It's better this way. We're just going to go forward. But yeah, that's the new news is that I'm starting to get back into where I need to be.
Ditto. I fell off the horse these last. I am by far at my peak when I have a regular routine, and when I travel a lot, things just go out of the window. And so I've been basically in and out of routine now since May. And so have done bits here and there, but I've started jogging again, was a little bit disturbed at how quick I needed to take a break. Because I was jogging pretty regularly in Austin and was going to the gym pretty regularly. I am happy to report I've reached my maximum ever push-up regime. I hit 53 a couple of weeks ago, which, like, for all you buff people, that must be amazing.
53, that's a lot.
Thank you. And I'm built like a fucking meerkat. So this is an impressive amount. And started taking cold showers again. The trick is to not start with a frigid shower. It's to have a kind of cold shower, then let it slowly get there. So, and I bought a clock so I can now time it, as opposed to shouting at Alexa, who is the woman that I live with.
Yeah, that's one of those things that Huberman says is good for you, is the whole cold shower in the morning, where I'm just like, nah, I don't care what the benefits are. I'm never doing it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
what is the deal? It shocks your body into like a primal state where it's like, oh yeah, we need to burn fat. Like this is terrible. We might die in an ice flow.
Two things. I think the main thing that there's pretty good consensus on, and it sounds like Jen knows the mechanics of this better than me, but I think the main thing is that it does demonstrably restrict capillaries temporarily, because you're putting all of your extraneous limbs under cold water. So it's sort of you're sort of pumping more blood through the main bits. So you're for lack of a better term, you're flushing your arteries or something like that. So it's good for circulation. The other bit, and this is, I think has decent supposition on it, but I don't know if it's been proven yet. There's a school of thought that you want to put your body under various stressors in order to have your body go into, oh shit, we need to repair cells mode as opposed to growth mode. So saunas, cold showers, really strong cardiovascular exercise, and intermittent fasting are all ways where your body goes, uh-oh, we better like quit doing cell division and focus on cell repair. And it can have palliative effects on metabolism and longevity.
Yeah, I haven't looked into the science that much. I pretty much tune it out, since my theory on it is like, nah. But the people that I know that do it, they tell me that what they experience, what they enjoy, is that they are in a better mood all day. It's something like, I do something super hard first thing in the morning, and then after that, like nothing could be worse. And so I just figured, I've been a bitch for 42 years. I'll just keep that going. It's served me well.
Yeah. If Jen came in all happy and peppy, it would really freak me out. I'd be like, when's the other shoe gonna drop? I don't like this at all.
Yeah, we had a Patreon when I was in Hawaii where I was in a good mood, and it freaked both of you out.
Yeah.
On the note of getting things done that are hard, I do monthly resolutions. I don't always do them, but I find month-long chunks are good experiments because you're not committing to a full year. And I tried a thing a few years ago where the only experiment I ran that month was I do my to-do list is an order of what I don't want to do. So as opposed to normally when I've got like, this is the most important thing, I have to get this thing done today, probably need to get this thing done today. This is important, but I can kind of do it whenever. That's normally how I allocate it, kind of standard, productivity model, the Eisenhower method, I think. I was just like, what am I dreading in my to-do list? And I would do that first, and it was goddamned amazing. It takes so much psychic energy to do it. But what I found was my stupid brain will go, I really don't want to do this particular thing. And it will find all sorts of ways to stretch out every preceding task by hours. Yeah. And then you just get it done. And it's like a house of cards collapsing where you're like, oh, now I can do 15 things in an hour. It's great.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I saw a thing on one of the ChatGPT Reddits that was like, if you have a barnacle of a to-do, one that's just like stayed there for a while and it's just kind of staring you in the face, just ask ChatGPT, how could I split this into 5 different tasks? Or like, if I wanted to do this, what would be a first step that would take me under 30 minutes to do? And it's like, if anything, it kind of shows sort of the worth of AI and therapy, ironically, operating on the same principles that you were just offloading a thing to another brain.
That's a really, really good thing. That I've been doing that for years. If I've got a task that's overwhelming, I break it down into its composite tasks, because then it's like I have to, I don't know, like sign a mortgage. That's a big fucking thing, right? But it's like, no, there's like 18 different things I need to do. And one of them is I need to look up mortgage companies. Like, you can do that. I agree. That one's really, really helpful.
I've been using an app called Todoist for a couple of years now, and I put literally everything into it, right down to like, take my supplements at this time. Like, We're Not Wrong is in it every week. It's Walk Abby will be in it. And it's really gratifying to see all the little tasks. And at the end of the day, like, I've got them done. And just the mental freedom that I'm feeling from not having to remember what I have to do.
That's huge.
Has been amazing. Yeah. And if there's something where I'm just like, I don't have to do this till next week, I can move it to next week and then like truly forget about it until it shows up again. So organizing my life like that has been a huge game changer.
I use the same app, although I'm thinking about switching over to, what's the one you use, Justin? Nokia or Notation or something like that?
Notion. But that's, I mean, some people use it for to-dos. I tend to use it for project stuff.
Okay. Yeah, one of my friends here in the DC area has like a unified string theory of all apps that goes through Notation. So he's got like just his calendar. Notion. What is it? What am I calling it? Nokia.
Notion. You're calling it.
You're calling it a lot of things.
And Notation. It is either. It is just Notion.
Notion. Okay, it's pronounced Nokia where I'm from. So he runs it
from the Latin Nokia.
Yeah. Oklahoma's very big on Latin, but I don't know. I'm going to sit down and just force him to explain his system to me. See if I can't come up with a better method.
Notion actually they have a lot of cool AI stuff now too, that you can, and also you can publish your pages. Really, Notion, you should think of more as like, if Google had thought of like docs and spreadsheets, like everything that is in Google Drive, if they had thought of designing that anytime over the last 2 decades, like that's what Notion is more like. It is like essentially a modern version of that. But there's a lot of people who do a lot of automation on it. And now they have a public facing version where you can, have other people interact with it, which is nice. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come like really, really, really fast with some of these tools that are available.
Wait until that integrates with email. Like, I know that Gemini
Notion has email now.
Does it? Because I've played around with Gemini and it fucking sucks. Like Gemini, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and this, and it's just doing word search. It's just doing key terms that I can already search for sex party. I can already search for that. But
exactly.
What I need to do is like, hey, like I've got like I get a lot of patron messages, and I am slow but dutiful in responding to them, and I've found that it's very helpful to me if I lump them into subcategories. I'm like, all right, today I'm just going to work on people have policy questions. This one's personal advice. This one's like, it would be helpful for me if I had an AI assistant that could go, here are the 5 different types of Patreon questions you tend to get. Let's just do these today. Then I wouldn't have to do mental switching, which I find to be very cognitively taxing. If I'm going back and forth between, here's a YouTube video. What do you think of the farm bill? Do you have advice on travel in Oklahoma? Like, my brain has to access very different regions. So I would love AI to assist me in that.
Yeah, we're close. We're close. In fact, there's a lot of stuff that OpenAI has been doing, these like 12 days of shipments. So they're new features that they're putting out there. And one of them was with Apple, because now ChatGPT is woven into iOS. But even then in their demo, it's 1 degree away from actually being good. Like, they're like, hey, ChatGPT, help me create a holiday party. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing, because iOS already has access to all my contacts. I could use ChatGPT to determine a list of people, and then I can winnow it down. And it has access to people who have the same telephone code, area code that I do. Like, there's a lot of cool things. But no, it's just like, oh, here's a list of things you could do at a holiday party. And I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. And then there's like, hey, make a holiday playlist. And I'm like, that's amazing. I have Apple Music. It could just use it. No, it just lists the songs. And it's like, you're still 1 degree away. I'm like, where's the permission slip? Like, can I be the test monkey just to actually make these technologies useful?
You guys remember my Burn Supper playlist? That thing's kicking. I found a bunch of like bagpipe covers of 90s music. So when I have my annual Scottish party where I force feed my friends haggis and trick them into drinking Iron Brew, like it'll just be like Blink 182 and you're like, this sounds weird. And then a bagpipe will just fucking blare over.
Exactly. It's like, is this all the small things?
That was a good playlist.
Yeah. Thank you.
From Austin, Texas, I'm Justin Robert Young. From LA, from Orange County. Where are you, Jen?
Redondo Beach.
Redondo Beach, California.
I'm Jen Brainy.
And from Alexandria, Virginia.
I'm Andrew Heaton.
And we're not wrong. On this edition of the program, we're going to talk about the stalling of generational leadership change in the House, as well as the drones that have overtaken the skies and the imaginations of Americans, especially on the East Coast. But before we do that, I hesitate to even call it reporting because it's just scurrilous gossip of what's happening in Congress right now. Do you want some scurrilous?
I would love some scurrilous gossip.
Congressional gossip.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, Jen, as you well know, we are at the period of bullshittery in Congress where everybody wants to go home. And there are still things like funding the government that haven't happened, which means
what if we just put it into one big bill at the end of the year and put a gun to America's head to sign it? That sounds fun.
And so
this year it's even worse. They're not even funding the government. They're just doing the extra stuff. So it's
So
what is the extra stuff? Okay, please continue. Sorry.
Here's the lay of the land. The lay of the land is obviously we are going from a Republicans control one of the 3 chambers that determine things, just the House barely, to Republicans will control all 3 in the new year. So they want to do a continuing resolution to essentially fund the government between now and next March, which will fall in the middle of Trump's 100 days. So they'll probably wind up having to kick it down the road again. But still, that's what they want to do now. Here's the problem. The Republicans are not like the Democrats in that they can do a party line vote because there are enough Republicans that have made their entire personality and career on the fact that they don't do continuing resolutions. So there are not enough functioning Republicans that would even agree ever to do a continuing resolution to move it forward. So it has to work with the Democrats. And so what I have heard are that the Democrats understanding that they can delay this as long as possible and they don't have to pay the bill because it's Speaker Johnson who's going to have to eat it. And, the Republicans are the chaos Congress, are essentially their entire personality for the next 2 years. They might as well get a head start on it. Have made incredibly ridiculous asks to get their votes, made total non-starter negotiation tactics. And then Speaker Johnson, who now is well ensconced in Trump world and doesn't really feel like he has to care about the opinions of any of the fringier members of the House, has essentially negotiated this entire thing in secret, therefore violating all of the promises that he made when he got the worst job in the history of DC, which is the leader of a Congress with like a 3-vote majority. And so now everybody's mad and they want to go home and they can't go home. And the continuing resolution is essentially an omnibus, which Speaker Johnson said he would never do. And meanwhile, there's a bunch of stuff that's in there, specifically with like trade. And there's a thing about aid to Haiti that's being bandied back and forth. And the frustration, this is what I've heard, is that the members of the Republican conference don't know it's in this bill 2 days ago, right? Then they have lobbyists come into their office and explain to them what's in the bill because the lobbyists have seen it, because the leadership has it. They just haven't disseminated it down the road because they know what is happening right now, that they would be very mad about it. And they want to get this as close to Christmas as possible before they try to force it up the chain. So that is what I have heard.
The bill came out last night. I already have it downloaded on my computer. And just to explain like what I mean by it doesn't fund the government, there are 12 appropriations bills that are supposed to be done, carefully crafted for 2025. A continuing resolution just kicks the 2024 numbers. And all the agencies hate these because they can't start any new programs. Like there's a lot of problems when you're operating on a CR. And they're kind of used to doing that until December. Like they've testified, like we're used to congressional dysfunction. So we've kind of changed how we do everything. Like we wait for our big purchases until the new year. And this is a new Congress. So this is even more so they are expecting this to be done. So it's kind of scandalous that they're finishing 0 out of the 12 and kicking it now until March into a brand new Congress to begin with. But usually when they do these CRs, if there's something that's an emergency, that might get stuck onto it. This is different in that, like the omnibuses, when you are funding the government the proper way, they'll stick all kinds of shit onto those to like have them hitchhike their way into law. I call these things dingleberries. Well, this is a continuing resolution, so it's still like not doing its job, which is 1,547 pages full of dingleberries. I've never seen a continuing resolution like this.
Because it's not. It is an omnibus. It's like a sneaky omnibus. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the craziest. I mean, it's the perfect ending to this horrible Congress. They've done everything wrong. And so yeah, and it's just stuffed with all kinds of stuff. Like there's something about the football stadium for the what do we call it now? The Commanders or whatever.
RFK Stadium, that it would be paving a way for a refurbishment of that stadium within DC.
Well, that seems like a great use of taxpayer funding from across the country.
Well, they're good again.
Yeah, because how could America ever somehow come up with the money through the private sector to build a stadium? It'd be impossible. There's not enough people.
It's not like the NFL is profitable.
Yeah.
It's not popular or profitable.
Yeah.
You should be able, I'm down to pay for their stadium, but they have to call themselves the Redskins again. And they can never, and their mascot has to be more offensive.
I like that idea. Yeah. This is all ridiculous. My initial thought as you're describing this shit show to me is this is an absolutely ridiculous way to run the federal budget. But maybe if we give these same people more money and power, it would fix everything.
Can I float a thing that came into my head today though?
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, and I mean within the next year, and I would say that this is something we could all get behind, and listeners to this show could be the foot soldiers in a grassroots movement. Now's the time for gerrymander reform. Because right now, there are arguments to be said that gerrymandering actually prevented the Republicans from gaining more seats than they already had, because they actually had a better overall nationwide number in terms of people who voted for them. So right now, they could make the argument like, okay, hey, the days of milk and honey are here forever. We're now the party of the working class, which means that we're going to do better on a wider scale than we did before, because it's the Democrats that are pocketed in smaller and smaller places. And therefore, in the way that we do these House appointments, that means that they are going to have less and less of a land to play with. But also, we're close enough to Democrats making gerrymandering such a priority that they would look like massive hypocrites if they didn't support any kind of reform. So there's a very small window where you could try to push something federally. I don't know what that would be. It would obviously butt up against the sovereignty that the states have to draw up their own districts. Maybe you tie it to funding for something. But that's I think that there's a small window where Republicans would be very horny for gerrymandering reform, whether or not, depending on where it goes.
So I'm going to put a little bit of bury your hopes, because I actually talked to Representative Ray LaHood about this, and he's one of the higher ranking dudes. And so he's from Illinois, gerrymandered by Democrats, big mad about it. And so he's against gerrymandering, but only in his state. So he makes this a states' rights thing. And I think as long as you have that ideological barrier, I don't see the Republicans being down with doing something federally, even though like what's wrong in one state is wrong in 50. That argument didn't seem to like compute with him. So I just don't think the Republicans are there yet.
Well, right now, the Republicans are probably are going to, at the very least, get 4 years of dealing with a 4-seat majority. And who knows whether or not they are going to lose it. The history would say that they will in 2 years, but they barely kept it this time.
Great news. The great news is there's actually a lot of really hypocritical Republicans that only give a shit about states' rights when it advances their options.
Bada bing, bada boom.
I am, as you all know, jurisdictionally fixated on what is the law. So if the law is, look, this is the states, it's their prerogative, they can do whatever they want, including stupid bullshit, I would support that if that is the law, right? That being said, though, a lot of people that sound like me, when you put the stress test on them, don't end up following through on that. When Oklahoma, by referendum, legalized marijuana 10 years ago, the then attorney general, whose name escapes me, thank God I didn't like the guy, of Oklahoma, who was a big conservative states' rights guy. It was when Colorado, I think, like full on legalized it, that he was like, well, we're going to sue Colorado in federal court through the interstate clause. And I was like, wait, what? Like the Commerce Clause, the thing that you were constantly railing about as this bête noire of states' rights and how they got like, you're going to use that. And it's like, oh yeah, because you don't like marijuana. So when somebody else uses it, then all of a sudden it needs to be a federal issue. So figure out how to corner the bastards.
Yeah.
I think look, if you argued to Republicans, if you went on Fox News enough and said, if we had federal gerrymandering reform, Republicans would have a 20-seat majority in the House based on the numbers, you might have some people calling their congressman saying, get this Jerry out of the House. I don't care what the Mander family has done for us.
Yeah. I mean, I would consider voting for them if they were actually serious about it. And just the fact that like they know it's wrong. Like having that conversation with LaHood, there was no question about gerrymander as wrong. It was just he wanted it to stop in his state and not in the Republican state. So that's where it got icky. But they know. So I think if we made a fuss, there's a chance.
I also think that gerrymandering is at a point now where we're at the point of diminishing returns on it, where it has gone so far and these districts have gotten so ridiculous that they are easy to be wrong. It's one thing if you're just generally drawing a circle around like, okay, liberals be living here. Like, is there a college? Congratulations. You get one district and we're going to go all the way through the neighborhood where all the professors live. That's pretty much it. That's now one district. Congratulations. But when you do like there's an argument to say that the Republican gerrymander that DeSantis did in Florida denied the Republicans like 3 seats because they wound up putting places that turned out to be voting redder than they were expecting into Democrat held areas. And so I do think that part of it is also like, hey, we have shifting coalitions. So in a world of shifting coalitions, all the math that you just did on these are Democrats, these are Republicans are all demographically based and they're changing. They're wrong. Like Texas, I'm sure the next time that they draw districts, they're going to draw their districts on the border different because now they're like, oh, holy shit. Now there's a bunch of Republicans that are going to quinceañeras. So now we want more of them.
Yeah. Well, just look at our district, Justin. Like our district is ridiculous. It shatters our community because we live in Austin and yet our district also includes a significant portion of San Antonio, which is like an hour drive away.
Well, no, you're part of the larger Austin, San Antonio metroplex. Like everybody in Texas thinks of it that way. Austin is like, Round Rock, completely separate.
Yeah.
Georgia, separate. But like San Antonio, Austin, they're basically the same city. They're what, like 3 hours apart?
And there's 3 districts that do that. It's not just ours. It's wild.
Yeah, so now we are in the same district. We were at one point, despite living 10 minutes away from each other, Jen, myself, and Heaton had 3 different representatives in Congress because Austin had been sliced and diced deli thin by the Republican gerrymander.
My first book was called Laughter is Better Than Communism, and it was just a grab bag of random things. And one of the chapters was gerrymandering as Rorschach tests, where I just looked at congressional districts and was like, what does this look like to you? This looks like to me 2 squids having sex on a surfboard. This one looks like a monkey throwing a frisbee. Like the New York ones are great because under federal law, roads and waterways count as continuous. So like in Illinois, you'll have situations where you can open all the doors of your car and be in 3 different congressional districts at once because the road is a completely separate congressional district than either field on either side of it. This little vein, right? But when you get into New York, like New York City specifically, where I lived for a while, the waterway counts. So there'll be like a pocket up in the Bronx. And then there'll be a pocket on Staten Island. And it's just this, it's like fucking Tetris of just completely unrelated communities. But they vote Republican or they vote Democrat or whatever the fuck they're trying to accomplish.
No. In New York City, it's like, all right, well, you have like 3 places where Republicans live. It's like the ass end of Queens, Staten Island, and then a few places in between it. So they're just like, all right, let's link those through the Narrows. It's like Coney Island to Staten Island, anywhere that you might possibly see a MAGA hat.
Although to get it a little bit weirder on that, like just I'm not going to go down a heat and rabbit hole on electoral reform here, but like I would do a lot. Like New York City itself has a bigger population than 30 U.S. states. Isn't that weird? Isn't that just weird that a city has a bigger population than 38 U.S. states? I'm like that. We're due for an overhaul.
Yeah. Is it weird though?
Yes.
There's a lot of land.
This is what I would do. And everybody in New York really likes this. I would say Long Island, which includes New York City, becomes its own state. Like New York City would become a city state. It would be New York City and Long Island. You call it Long Island would be the name of the state. And New York City would be its own state. And then upstate New York would probably be purple. And so like, and when I talk to anybody from New York, all the upstate New Yorkers who are pissed off their entire life that whenever anybody says New York, you're like, oh, New York, I love New York. Do you live in Manhattan? And they're like, no, I live in Albany. Like they hate that, right? When you're like, you think New York City should be separate from your state? They're like, God, yes. Meanwhile, all the New York City people fucking hate the bumpkins up in New York State. So like this would please everybody.
Yeah.
I want more states. That's what I want.
Certainly
more
for
states.
New York State.
Like 150 more states.
Although you would have to just transplant. You have to give the state house to the new city. Like, cause they've screwed that up so bad. Like the actual state government of New York is one of the most fucked up, corrupt things that I have ever seen in my entire life. And I was born in Florida.
My old buddy, George Nye, former governor of Oklahoma, I saw him last summer. He's like 98 now. He's doing great. We had margaritas and Governor Nye was like, Andy, I'm going to die soon. Make sure I'm buried in Pittsburgh County so I can keep voting.
It's a great
guy,
line.
George Nye.
God, fucking politician humor. All right, let's talk about the House, and that is specifically on the Democratic side. Representative Ocasio-Cortez lost her bid for ranking member of the House Oversight Committee to Representative Jerry Connolly of Virginia, who has served on the committee for 16 years. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride for Connolly. He has never chaired a committee in his career. That is up until now, when he still won't chair it, but he will be at least the ranking member. Connolly won with 131 votes to AOC's 84 with support from former Speaker Nancy Pelosi ahead of President-elect Trump's term. By the way, Pelosi did this with a broken hip, which she broke while she was in Europe. She fell down a flight of stairs.
I heard fucking.
She actually broke it while taking a picture. Did you guys see this?
Well, she took the picture afterwards. She's a gamer. She's a hockey player. So she broke
Michael
her hip
McCall is like holding her up like Weekend at Bernie's while she's got this broken hip in the front of the picture.
While AOC's bid represented a push for progressive leadership and generational change, Connolly, who has cancer, by the way, has committed to leading the opposition against Republican initiatives. Jen, explain to everybody what the Oversight Committee is, what it means when you are the oppositional party, and should AOC have gotten this post?
So the Oversight Committee, when it was controlled by Democrats, was my favorite committee. At the time, it was chaired by Carolyn Maloney, and they were doing some really important consumer protection work. So some of the episodes that I did based on their work was there was a baby bed, the rock and play sleeper. And this bed was on our shelves for over a decade. And they knew that the angle that the kids were sleeping in, like the kids slept really well in it, but sometimes to the point that they were dead. And so there was a lot of kids that died in these beds. And so because of this investigation that happened in Congress, they were able to get that fully pulled from our shelves. They also did an investigation that, as a dog owner, was important to me because there are these flea and tick collars. They're manufactured by Seresto. And they are also getting a lot of reports of these collars being poisonous. They took 2 pesticides that are, or whatever, like the poison that goes into the collars. They took 2 that were safe and created a combo in these particular flea and tick collars that seems to be quite dangerous. And so that was the type of stuff that the Democrats were working on. And those investigations disappeared when James Comer and the Republicans took over the Oversight Committee. And now the Oversight Committee really functions as a hunt down Hunter Biden stories committee. It's quite a shame.
Documentary now. I believe everything Jamie Comer said after those pardons.
I mean, it would be kind of interesting to go down the rabbit hole if I cared enough.
That's my new. I will take no further questions. Jamie Comer has never told a lie. If Hunter Biden gets a pardon for 15 years.
So if you're interested in that, Oversight Committee is where you look. But I've paid attention to the Oversight Committee for a while, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was voted the vice chair on the Democratic side for this Congress. And whatever you think about her politics, I can tell you, as someone who has watched her on these committees now, I think since 2017, I think that's how long she's been in Congress. She is excellent in hearings. She shows up always prepared. She clearly is not being just like coached by her staff. She understands the issues. She asks the best questions. She's really, really good at this. And then after the hearings, she'll go out on the steps of the Capitol and communicate to people, or she'll go onto her Instagram and do these Instagram lives for like an hour while eating macaroni and cheese and telling people like, this is what went on today. So she's a really good communicator. And I think she would be and is going to be the future of the Democratic Party. And it is just so short-sighted of this party to keep fighting her ascension. She's the biggest celebrity that they have. And instead they choose Gerald Connolly. Like, most people don't know who he is. I don't think he's a star in the Democratic Party. And I think he's kind of a
Give
dick.
him 20 years. Give him 20 years. He's only 74 right now.
Exactly.
74.
He's in his prime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's just
exactly.
about, you know what, a pot's about to boil. That's where he is.
And he's one of those that will come into the hearing and like, he'll ask decent questions, but he's one of those that's being coached by his staff. You can see it.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't think he's the best person for the job, but I think he is coziest with the octogenarians that just keep clinging to power in this party. And I just think that this is indicative of them learning nothing from this past election. So I think it's a real shame. I do know that AOC is going to stay on the committee. When you don't have the gavel and you don't get to pick, you know, what the investigations are, I don't think it's that big of a deal right now that she's not the head Democrat, because there's a limit to what you can do. If they were in charge of Congress and she was going to be the person picking the investigations and like running the show, I think this would be a much bigger deal. So hopefully, you know, the next time around, she'll have a better chance. Because on the committee itself, the Democrats wanted her. They didn't want Connolly. This was the steering committee, which is kind of like a bigger part of Congress. So that's why the party leadership has more say in what goes. But I think it's just indicative. But then she lost the
general vote too, which means
she did, but not on the committee itself. The committee itself, the people that are on it, they like her leadership.
They wanted her. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So now I will say, like, bigger picture when it comes to what's going on in the Democratic Party, there have been now 3 or 4 people that you would think based on seniority would get the top jobs on the committees that haven't. The latest one that went down was David Scott, I believe. Hold on, I have it right here. David Scott went down. He's 79 years old, and it's like one of the worst kept secrets in Washington that he's
79.
No, he's
lying about his age. He gets Botox and he's like, I love Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I came out when I was 15.
No, he's 79. They know that. But the fact that he's not all there anymore. And reporters are saying it's quite sad. They were saying that he shouldn't run for re-election. And he didn't really fight for his committee chairmanship. So he lost it to someone who's 52 years old. And then there were 3 other people that you would think would keep their... Yeah, so there's 3 total. David Scott, Raul Grijalva, and Jerry Nadler lost their positions as the head of their committees. And so it's not a total, all of the elderly are holding on for dear life and succeeding. But the AOC one, because she's such a good communicator, I think this is a real big mistake on their part.
Heaton, what do you think?
I'd have probably voted against her, but maybe I'd have come around. I don't know. This is not something that I have as much expertise in. I have very little expertise in this compared to Jen, who knows the topic much better. I'm also just not as emotionally connected to this one, so I'm swayable. But as somebody who is not a fan of AOC, I hesitate to give her a spotlight that would further give her meteoric rise propulsion. But I can be talked out of this. I do want to ask just some basic questions about this because I'm not super familiar with the Oversight Committee. It's my understanding that the Oversight Committee, as you all noted, is selected by the caucus as a whole. It's not done at the discretion of the Speaker. It's my understanding that the Oversight Committee is effectively a watchdog committee as opposed to a policymaking committee. So we're not talking about economics here. We're not talking about bills. We're talking about congressional scrutiny. But please correct me on this, is not the Oversight Committee meant to be primarily looking at federal corruption and efficiency? Isn't that kind of the point of it? Is it's Congress's watchdog of the federal government?
Well, I mean, that's what the Republicans say because they're not down with the consumer protection investigations that were going on. So I think that's more spin than reality. They're allowed to do whatever investigations they want, and they were.
Does Congress have any wing that actually monitors federal efficiency or corruption?
I mean, there's a lot that do that.
Okay, it's my understanding that this is the primary source for that. That this would be the beachhead for just is federal spending efficient, which I want there to be. I want the government to work well. So if there's a better committee than this, I'd like to know. But it's my understanding that is the Oversight Committee, that they're watchdog for the federal government.
But that's the job of all the committees. And so that's why you have the appropriations committees constantly bringing in the heads of agencies to talk to them about their budget and what are you doing? And that's all the committees.
So is the Oversight Committee just like a Congress subpoena committee? Like if the Republicans are in charge, they drag in Hunter Biden. If the Democrats are in charge, they bring in corporations?
Kind of. Yeah. In functionality, that is exactly what's happening.
This sounds to me like it's just a spotlight committee. Then you point out, Jen, it doesn't sound like there is a difference here. It's just we're really just talking about whether we want to give boost to AOC's career or not. But otherwise, I guess if you're the committee chair, you've got subpoena powers because you don't have to have them done independent, or you have independent subpoena powers as the chair of this committee. But otherwise, it's just a big spotlight. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, right now, the position that we are talking about is the first rebuttal to this entire thing is bullshit, right? So it's like when the Democrats are in second position, that means that the Republican chair will stand up and say, I would like to question Liz Cheney about, deleting January 6th footage or something like that. And then we're talking about the first person who's going to speak right after that. That's going to say, fuck this. This is bullshit. This is stupid. We should be talking about this other thing, right? Like that's what we're doing here. That's what this position would be functionally.
Yeah. And you have to put yourself in the position of you're in the Democratic Party right now, which obviously you are not. But if you look at what they should be trying to do with their position, not just on the Oversight Committee, but on all the different committees where they have that second 5-minute opening statement, you want your best communicator. I can tell you Gerald Connolly is not it. So I think that's more the issue. It's not about AOC's career. It's that she has proven herself to be good at the job. And she's good in the moment, too. She doesn't need the notes from the staff in order to make a good point. She can do it on the fly in a way that Connolly just doesn't. So I think that's more why I'm disappointed. It's just the Democrats not seeing when they have a good person for the job.
Is there any
and giving them it?
Is there any element of this job as chair or ranking member that is behind the scenes? Or is it 100% in front of the scenes? Because if there's like a organizational side of this, I could see why institutional expertise would be useful. If it's entirely on camera, I agree. She's a rock star. She's very media savvy. She's an excellent communicator. I disagree with a lot of her positions, but she's unquestionably talented at all of those elements of the job. Are there any parts of the job that are not on camera?
So, there are things that the Democrats can do. So they can, I don't really know how it works with the permissions, but like, let's say they wanted to do a round table. The committee members that are only Democrats can do like a round table. It is a congressional event and do it. They can invite Republicans or not, or do whatever they want. So it's like there is some, being the leader gives them some leeway in that. But I think the main function is really just being that person that gets to make the case, that always gets the opening statement and usually gets a closing statement as well. I think that's the main function. The behind the scenes stuff, I mean, where it really matters is if you're in charge of the committee, if your party has the entire House, that's the main thing. So that's why I say like, this isn't that big of a deal institutionally. I'm looking at more like putting myself in the Democratic Party's shoes and going, was this a strategically wise decision? And I don't think it is. And I think it just concerns me that we have these people that are so old and clinging to power. And this is just another example of that, of them just like not letting the next generation move forward, even after this disaster of an election.
Jen, if I might dare say that I totally agree with you that this is not entirely about AOC's career. With that, let's talk about AOC's career, because I do think that it does run through this. She wanted this position because she assumes, and I think rightly, based on historical trends, that the Democrats will win the House in 2 years. And it's going to be nearly impossible for her to lose that chair as the actual person who would run that committee in 2 years. So she wanted it now so she could have it then. And the argument for why she would want it now, why make a move now, is because there are rumors out there that in the power vacuum of who will lead the Democratic Party going forward, especially for presidency, AOC is a name that has been floated out there. She has moderated her positions and been more of a team player for the Democrats than she was at the very beginning of her career. This has come to the great frustration of a lot of progressives, but I think it makes sense. When we were at the DNC, in the room, she played as well as anybody. And she was not giving a firebrand progressive speech. She was giving a rah, rah, blue, no matter who speech. She stood by Biden until the very end. She stood by Kamala no matter what. She did not run afoul of it for her own perspective. And the thought there was that she was proving that she could be a good girl, that she could color within the lines, that she could not be Ilhan Omar, she could not be Rashida Tlaib, she could not just freak out and run off in her own direction. And for her sacrifice, Nancy Pelosi organized the denial of the promotion that she was seeking.
Yeah.
I think it shows, A, that Nancy Pelosi still runs that conference.
That sounds like a great job
no
to
one's
be
talking.
behind the scenes kingmaker, not actually run the day-to-day bullshit, but whenever there's a big decision, just pick up a red phone and go, no, I don't like her. Don't do it. Click.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Notice that we're not talking about who Hakeem Jeffries endorsed. We're always talking about Pelosi.
Yeah.
No one cares what Jeffrey says.
No.
She's still running
Pelosi says, though, she gives the thumbs down from the Emperor's box, and that was that. It was a wrap for AOC. I will wonder what will happen in 2 years. I also know that for AOC, this is partly building the highlight reel. This is the highlight reel that's going to be in that first ad when the Democrats, God willing, move the first caucus back to Iowa, that she's going to be out there. And that first announcement ad is just going to be a lot of shit of her asking pointed questions on the Oversight Committee to X, Y, or Z about, ABC. And that's going to be that if she is going to run, which at this point, considering how wide open the field is, she's got name ID. That's going to count for as much as anything. If you're going to talk me into Andy Beshear or Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer or anybody like that, they're all smaller names than AOC. And now that she's pointing herself more toward the middle than she was before, right? So don't save the emails. It's not like she's not John Fetterman, right? Who is actively saying,
yes,
look,
the moderate firebrand that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. When I think of tepid centrists.
She has absolutely moderated herself to the point that like a lot of people are calling her a sellout. You have to give her some credit because the people that were the biggest fans of her are quite annoyed with her right now for cuddling up to Nancy Pelosi. And a lot of people are like, well, look what you got for it. So she's taking some political heat for not being the political firebrand that like she's been branded by like Team Red. Team Blue is kind of disappointed in her right now because she was a firebrand. She was doing a better job of fighting for the working class. Yeah. And the progressives right now feel like we have no home in that party. So it's, she's not this caricature that people make of her, of this like crazy left winger. Like she's moderating, but you can tell it's still not enough for old lady Pelosi.
And that's the question is like, is there a home for her? So it's like, it's one thing to say, all right, progressives, I will always stand for you, but hey, look, we got to play the game here if we're going to get anything done. And she's kind of having that Kyrsten Sinema pathway, dare I say, of somebody that was very much of the progressive left. And then when she actually got into Congress, she was somebody that realized, I actually have to do things. I have to know people. If I want to get stuff over the line, I have to actually kind of play the game here. I can't, there's an empty calories to standing outside of the halls of power and screaming everything in there is bullshit. It's popular when you have no power, but when you actually have the ability to tilt the levers, you have to play the game. Now for Kyrsten Sinema, it ended her career because the progressive left hated her and she was never able to, find any kind of slipstream for power, and her party absolutely turned against her. I don't know if that'll be AOC's pathway, but she certainly is not the favorite in the minds of the progressives, and she does not appear to have a home with the centrists right now.
Well, AOC isn't like Kyrsten Sinema. She hasn't gone that far. Like, I will watch her lives every once in a while if I'm just like on Instagram and I catch them. And it's, if you are a Democratic Party that wants to get back to appealing to the working class, I can't think of a better person to pick than the former bartender who took down one of the party bosses. So she still is that. And her voting record, she's not fighting the party in the way that she once did, like the Fight for 15. She really like dropped that, the Green New Deal. She doesn't talk about this stuff as much. But when it comes down to votes, she's still voting the way that the progressives want to. So she hasn't lost all her credit. So that's why I think she still has a chance to bring back that left part of the party that just felt completely abandoned in 2024. She's still the best choice for that. And the fact that they are still pushing her down tells me that the party bosses still don't get it. Like they don't trust her. It's not just her. I don't think they trust that wing of the party because the Democrats, the way I see them now, this is a party that values fundraisers and donors and, the corporate PACs. They value them more than the working class that they used to fight for. And AOC is not in that. Like, she's not the prolific fundraiser like Nancy Pelosi is. And so she's not focused on getting as much corporate money as she possibly can and getting as many billionaires lined up. Like, she really is still the bartender that got into Congress. And so I think they distrust her because she is one of those people that I think if you give her the gavel, will take on some corporations that right now are giving money to the party bosses. So there is a disconnect there. And I think by keeping her down, they keep the donors happy. So it's just kind of like, whose side are you on? And I still see the leaders of this party not being on the side of the workers. And that's the fundamental problem.
Here's the political argument against her. The political argument against her is that we are, especially in the House, moving into a gerrymandered world where nobody is going to have a wide majority anymore. The era of like a 30-seat majority is just increasingly unrealistic. So yes, there might be a speaker, Hakeem Jeffries, in 2 years, but they'll probably have the same, if not possibly smaller of a margin of leadership than the Republicans do right now, just because of the way that all the districts are laid out. So if that's the case, and this is never going to be anything other than essentially a 50-50, the political argument against AOC is if she's in a position of leadership, then that means as a very famous avatar that gets Republicans to both vote and donate, she will materially hurt the electoral cause of Democrats in an election that they view they absolutely have to win, because it's unlikely that they're going to win the Senate back. They're certain they can't win the White House back until 4 years, but they can get the House. And that's a must win for them. And her at the top of the new Democratic Party is something that Republicans would relish running against.
But at the same time, this is a party that has ran further. Like every time the Republicans go further to the right to the point of being like lunatics, the Democrats also go to the right. The idea that they're like so left wing, like especially economically, just isn't true. So maybe because the centrist thing hasn't really worked out for them, like no one loves Joe Biden, and Barack Obama turned out to be a giant disappointment, letting the banks do whatever the fuck they want. I think maybe a new strategy of running to the left economically could be a winning strategy that they haven't really tried since 2008 Obama. So, there's a lot of people that feel like they are politically homeless, because if you are fiscally conservative, you have the right wing Republicans and you have the right wing Democrats, which are in charge of the party. If you want more government intervention, if you feel like I do, that we have a major corporate power problem in this country, no one in power is really speaking to that. AOC is. So they might actually have a winning strategy by going in that direction. Now, I get that, like, when you talk about going left wing, like, I'm not talking about, trans bathrooms, like, that's all distraction. I'm talking economic left-wing politics, like strengthening the New Deal programs instead of privatizing them. Like that's the type of stuff that I actually think could galvanize people who are getting absolutely crushed financially in this country. All the people that like Trump lied to and said that he was going to help. There's a lot of people that would be helped by Medicare for all, a higher minimum wage, like things that she's been talking about forever that the Democratic Party bosses don't want to do. So when you talk about electoral politics, like maybe giving that a chance in the party could win them votes. And that's what I'm not seeing in the leadership by keeping her down.
Heaton?
Yeah. Two things. First, as somebody that considers himself fiscally pragmatic or maybe fiscally conservative, I don't think that whatever I represent is winning at all. I don't see the federal government at any point shrinking in my lifetime. I don't see the amount of federal spending shrinking. I don't see the amount of regulations particularly shrinking. Occasionally the growth stalls and we go from being very large to getting larger at a slower pace, but we're not actually shrinking anything. So I don't think that there's been some like incredible neoliberal coup where the government's been shrank down an incredible amount. It just stops occasionally from growing. In terms of the electoral strategy, it might be a good move for the Democrats to go hard progressive, go with the Bernie Sanders wing of the party. That might work. From my vantage point, though, I would not be a part of it. I supported Biden in 2020. I voted for Joe Biden. I am somebody that's politically homeless. I would describe myself as a moderate among various things. There's different labels that can apply, but I can like go Republican or Democrat. And right now, what I see with the Democratic Party from the outside looking in is everybody I know that's a Democrat or that is inclined towards the Democratic Party believes that the shellacking that occurred in the last one is caused by the other wing of the party. So the Matt Iglesias wing of the Democratic Party is
Civil
going.
War.
The progressives are taking they're going in loony directions that are not popular and that are fringe beliefs. And we've got to abandon that and become a responsible adult moderate party that can broadly appeal to the country as a whole. The flip side of the coin is doing what Jen's talking about, going, these are just microwave Republicans. They're diet Republicans. They're diet light or Republican light. We got to go far to the progressive side. It might like a lot of my positions are unpopular. So I'm not going to claim that I'm a good bellwether for the country. But I will say, like, I feel at home with the like Colorado Democrat, Hickenlooper, Michael Bennett, Jared Polis wing of the party. I like the Matt Iglesias wing of the party. If it becomes the AOC thing, then I'm out. And I've voted Democrat more than I voted Republican the last 15 years. Which,
I mean, you're not the target audience for this. Like, I'm looking for the politically homeless that are, and I think there's a difference between being fiscally responsible and being fiscally conservative. So like Medicare for all Bernie Sanders has ordered so many different reports on this from the Congressional Budget Office. We would save money on it by not spending like 20% of our money on administration. Like, there are ways to save money by doing things that help people. So it's not necessarily that I'm saying that the government gets bigger. I hate when we have this conversation about big government or little government, because we want efficient, responsible government, or whatever the hell this is that is letting the corporations do whatever they want and we're getting hammered. So I think that it's not really about big or small. I think that there's a lot of people would like to see our government be more active. So it's like we just had this big healthcare conversation. Like, we have laws in the books that are not being enforced on housing, on corporations that are middlemen in our healthcare system, because it's, pharmacy benefit managers and health insurance companies and these private equity vultures that have bought up all our hospitals and our doctors. And there's a lot of different players there. And I just feel like when I talk about government not working, I'm not really talking about the numbers. I'm talking about them not enforcing laws on companies. And I think AOC is one of the people that sees this. And she's one of those people that can speak to the anger that we're seeing right now in this country. And it's in so many different industries where we're just getting nickeled and dimed. Like, we are 2 weeks away from a new year when the prices of everything will go up for no reason. She speaks to this. And so that's why I think she would be good for the future of the Democratic Party, because Trump was speaking to this. Now, based on his last administration and having read Republican bills for the last 12 years, I think they're going to allow even more corporate leniency in law. That's what they do. So I think it was mainly lies, but it worked. Like, the message worked that we're going to crack down on, price gouging and, we're here for you workers. Like, the working class is hurting, and the managerial, consultancy people that are in charge of the Democratic Party now, they seem more swayed by CEOs. And I think that's a problem with the party, because it's kind of the leadership of both of them.
I would say, as somebody who just watches elections, the Democrats would be better off running Andrew Heaton as far away from them as possible and going after people that tend to always vote Democrat. Because that is something that they have left dead cable on the ground, to the point where, as Jen pointed out, whether or not you agree with Donald Trump's sincerity or his ability to take up for the offers, he went after key Democratic constituencies. That is the reshaping of coalitions that we are seeing right now. And if you want more people who vote Democrat reliably, then you need to talk to those people who regularly and reliably vote Democratic. And I think that if that means alienating a Heaton, there are less of them than there are of the people that would be excited about the things that Andrew Heaton finds abhorrent. And he would have to find either a third party or the Republicans to agree with more. But right now, that is the fight. The fight is like, okay, coalitions are shifting. Where do we wind up planting our flag? Do we plant our flag more left? Do we plant our flag in more of a pragmatic position? Do we, because the things that they ran on turned out snake eyes, competency, Roe, like, these were all things that they were not in touch with their voters. They were not in touch with the people that they needed to turn out for them. And the coalitions that they were trying to go after, whoever they thought was Liz Cheney was appealing to, that they had to hitch their buggy to her for the last 3 weeks of this campaign, also didn't show up. There were, as it turns out, there were no Liz Cheney stands that came out and voted. So we'll see.
Jared Polis, 2028.
I would not be opposed to that.
He's going to be a part of he's going to be a part of the conversation. And that's it. The other question is, and even for AOC, I would say, where is the room for bipartisanship in the next 2 years? Because no one's going to have to run against Donald Trump again. But you can siphon a little bit of that working class. Right now, there's working class energy for him, whether or not it's real. But Bernie Sanders, John Fetterman, AOC ran on her Instagram stories, hey, if you were a voter for me and Trump, explain why, and made sure that was all over her Instagram so the party leadership could see it. In limited cases, I'd be curious whether or not there is bipartisanship room for just Trump in his lame duck.
I think there's a fair amount for that, because I think you've got the most transactional president we've ever had, who is not thinking ideologically at all, coming in. I think he's very much open. Like he's reversed positions on a number of things. And there's a benefit to this, which is you're not dealing with a Ron Paul or Bernie Sanders ideologue who you can bend horseshoes around their platonic ideals of what political economy should look at. You're going with somebody who's a lot more tactical than strategic. So I think there's definitely room for that. Plus, there's a fair amount of overlap. Like Trump wanted to cap credit card payments. Bernie Sanders wanted to cap credit card payments. They're both economic populists. That means there's going to be overlap there in terms of things they want to do.
There was a poll that came out this week about second choices for third party voters. So for people who did cast their ballot for third parties, who was their top choice amongst the two major parties? And for Jill Stein, RFK Jr., which obviously, because he wound up joining the Trump administration and was actively trying to kill his own independent candidacy, and Chase Oliver, the number one was Trump. Trump did very well with the Greens. He was a strong second choice for the Greens. And he was barely a second choice for Chase Oliver, which I found interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not totally surprised by this. So much of Donald Trump is the personality and the rhetoric, particularly for people like us that work in political media, or at least for me, I get hung up on the rhetoric. I have the last few years. And so it becomes the Trump thing. But if for folks that aren't focused on Trump quite the same way we are, particularly for folks that are less ideological, I don't know if you like tariffs, there's a lot of interesting positions that he has that do not fit into the stereotypical Reaganite Republican coalition. And so I could see people going yeah, I like that bit.
Does it surprise you that the libertarian, that it was the second choice of the libertarian? Especially Chase Oliver.
That one is such a mess. No, I'll say the interesting thing that I see with the libertarians is I think the libertarians are actually a really interesting bellwether for the new political fight that we're having in this country. I think I've always been wrong about being ideological. Most people don't think ideologically. It's really a tiny subset of people that do that. It's a fun exercise, but it's really not electorally important. For a while, I was I think it's socioeconomic, and I think it is more socioeconomic. I think that Jen's earlier point about the managerial class running the Democratic Party versus the insurgent class, I think that there's a lot to that. But the thing that I see with the Libertarian Party, now having spoken to lots of people that are involved in it and having gone to the convention, and I find that this is not a rule, but broadly speaking, the people that voted Libertarian that live in Washington, D.C. or New York City were a lot more likely to view Trump as abhorrent and want Kamala Harris. They didn't like Kamala Harris, but they preferred her. And people that lived outside of those two things, I found, were much more inclined towards Trump. And so I think you're seeing a kind of the same proxy fight going on in the Libertarian Party that you're seeing writ large in the country, where we are rapidly entering a period of institution versus outsider, institution versus populism. And so I see that happening. And I think the Libertarian Party has a pretty strong populist impulse right now, just like the other ones do.
I was interested in that because when I read the article from your new employer, Reason, before the election, they had a list of who they were voting for. And I think there was one person who said that they were even entertaining voting for Trump. It was by and large all Chase Oliver. And there was more than a few Kamala Harris.
Yeah, all DC people.
Out and out Kamala Harris people. Mm-hmm. And so it's Reason is, to me, the hood ornament of libertarian thought. And it has been for my entire lifetime.
Insofar as you can say that there's a libertarian establishment, that would be it. It would be the think tanks like Cato, the magazine like Reason, and then I guess the party itself, which is in tumult right now. But I would think that if we're making an axis of institution to outsider, that they'd be on the institution wing of it, temperamentally.
Do you think that that's I mean, not to make it about, reason specifically, but it's like, I guess I wouldn't have thought that they had a divide with the general opinion of the libertarian part or the libertarian body politic. But then again, the libertarian body politic is now probably more fractious than it ever has been. And it's never been calm.
Yeah, it's never been great. The thing that surprised me at the convention that you two attended with me is I had hitherto thought that the two wings of the Libertarian Party were we'll call them the classical liberals, like Gary Johnson, and the anarchists. And there's a very big difference. Classical liberals are like, government should exist, but it should be this narrow remit of stuff that it handles. So we want a small government, but we want a government, right? Whereas anarchists are like, all government is illegitimate. It's all magical thinking. It's all divine right rule. It's complete bullshit. It has no actual moral authority to it. It should be forgotten and ripped apart, right? So these
money is fake, bullets are real. Let's figure it out in the streets.
Exactly. So there's and I'm being reductive here for anybody that writes in, but those two are kind of the ideological dueling nodes of that party. The group that surprised me that I had, there were just a lot of people I met that just hated Democrats. That maybe they kind of fell in it, but like it was like there was a third wing of people that just really didn't like Democrats. And I saw a lot of that. And that kind of surprised me because I thought it was going to be ideological. I think if you can count on one party to go down ideological rabbit holes fucking ceaselessly, it would be the Libertarian Party.
And I think it's part of the ideological pool that Jen was just talking about it from the progressive side, that it's like the Democrats are the managerial bought and sold by the bankers element. And they've inherited more of that reputation than the Republicans have, shockingly, because that was the Republicans' bit for my entire childhood.
Oh, there's still that. It's just the Democrats are now, too. So there's a lot of people going like, well, shit. What do us customers do? Like, I don't know where to go.
By the way, I just had ChatGPT run through that Reason article of who we voted for. So this might not be exact, but this was the count. Chase Oliver, 12, non-voters, 6, Kamala Harris, 3, Nikki Haley, write-in, 1, Kennedy, the Fox News host, not Bobby's son.
My old boss,
1, and then 2 that were undecided. So there was only, I think one of those undecideds were saying, I'm thinking about Trump, but there was no out and out, I am voting for Donald Trump, which is fascinating to me because when you look at like at least the noise around like the Department of Government Efficiency, whatever you might think of Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, it's the closest thing to a libertarian wet dream that has been discussed in the pages of Reason my entire life. Never has
It's caused me a lot of cognitive. Well, two things. One, I think part of it could be age cohort. Like back, they did this. I didn't check in 2020 who they voted for. This is something laudable that Reason does, by the way. Reason will actually tell you how its people votes. They don't claim to be pure as the driven snow robot objectives that never have it. Like they don't do that. They'll actually tell you who they're going to vote for, which I think is laudable. In 2016, they did it, and it was much more evenly divided, as I recall. And the distinguishing characteristic seemed to be age. From what I could tell, older libertarians were like, "Yeah, I've heard every Republican called a fascist. Fuck that. I'm voting for Trump." That's kind of the impression I got. Whereas like now, like Stossel's not a part of the Reason crew anymore, and the median age is younger, so that could be it. In terms of the wet dream, there's some truth to that, Justin. I endorsed President Trump getting impeached shortly before I lost my first lucrative TV job. I left Fox because I didn't want to be at Fox during the Trump years. I've made demonstrable, financially perilous decisions in my life opposing Donald Trump. So I can say that I have been a very strong anti-Trump guy. And when he got elected this last time and I started looking at him like, oh, fucking no, been pretty good there. Oh, okay. I like that bit over there too. Huh. So I don't know. We're in the honeymoon phase right now, but I'm optimistic. There's some shit there's some shit he might do that I'm like, yeah, I like that bit. So maybe so. Maybe he'll end up being a libertarian wet dream, and we'll all have like a moment where we're like, did we just get really hung up on the fact that he said grab her by the pussy? That would be a great outcome. As if 4 years from now, I'm like, gosh, I was too precious and everything turned out great. That would be. I don't think that's going to happen, by the way, but it would be great. I would love it if I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm very, very curious to watch where the progressives go and where the libertarians go over the next 2 years specifically, and then 4 years generally, because both of these parties are very much in flux. Yeah. And I do think that collective elements that are outsider elements of the power structure are often where you see the movement, where you see where things are going to go and where people are going to coalesce around. Because the one thing that I know for sure is we're at the end of an era.
Yeah.
We are at the end. This is 1968. This is 1992. This is
earlier
this is
today.
like
I heard the last Blue Dog shot, the last one. You know, I probably I should.
No, they're back. Blue Dogs are back. Oh
what?
yeah. Oh no. That's it's where you saw the last Blue Dog shot like 8 years ago. Now it's Pet Cemetery, baby. They're emergent. Sometimes dead is better.
Can we talk about aliens now?
Patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. This week we will be talking about searching for your new home by political affiliation. Would you like to do that? That's going to be our Patreon episode this week. Head on over there right now, patreon.com/We're Not Wrong. Let's talk about drones. Recent drone sightings along the East Coast, particularly in New Jersey, have prompted responses from multiple federal agencies. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas attributes the increase in sightings to new FAA rules allowing night flights with no evidence of foreign involvement. As Representative Van Drew said, that there was a mothership of Iranian origin that was launching drones into New Jersey.
So good.
No evidence of that thus far. White House Press Secretary John Kirby clarified that most sightings are lawful aircraft operations, with some possibly being misidentified stars. Meanwhile, the Department of Defense has developed a strategy to counter potential threats from unmanned aerial systems, while New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy supports new federal legislation to regulate drone activities amid growing public concerns. Federal agencies do remain vigilant, monitoring the situation and encouraging citizens to report any suspicious drone activity to local authorities. Andrew Heaton, what are they hiding from us?
I think that they are hiding military drones from us, is my interpretation of this. So the UFO thing hit the big leagues in terms of national media about 5 years ago now, when the New York Times ran a headline. It was basically Pentagon admits UFOs exist. Paraphrasing it, but it was that, right? And it was Keene, I believe. Leslie Keene was the lead one on that. And it became a huge deal. Now, having worked in media, I know how this works, which is if the New York Times runs a headline on aliens, every other single publication goes, shit, we can talk about aliens now? This is great. So they all did it. It seemed like there was this national avalanche of alien reporting. We're like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the New York Post, the Miami Herald. And it's like, no, there's one story that's being run by Leslie Keene of the New York Times, and every other newspaper you're seeing is just reporting on that one story because they don't want to get left out in the cold. It's still just one story, right? And then I did an episode on the political orphanage. It's kind of the first like actual journalism episode I did where I researched stuff and investigated things. The Pentagon was like would say, yeah, we don't know what they are. And people would go, so aliens. And they'd go, no, there's a thing in the sky. We don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to be ours. We don't think it's Chinese, but we don't know what it is. And they're like, so aliens. And they go, again, when we say UFO, we're not saying flying saucer. When you say UFO, you're saying flying. We're not saying that, right? So the Pentagon never clarified any of that stuff. The more and more I looked into it, I was like, look, like this is almost certainly military testing aircrafts. I think in New Jersey's case, I think there's one or two military testing aircrafts, and there's a bunch of trolls that own drones that have turned this into a really fun weekend. That's my read on it. Is there's a bunch of people that are like, woohoo, time to fuck with the normies, and it just draws them in. So it's become like Burning Man for drone operators that are going on. But I don't think they're hiding aliens. Trump is saying weird shit. I would love for Trump, when he's president again, to just say whatever's on his mind. It's kind of weird for him to be cagey, in my opinion. He's not known for playing his cards close to his vest. So I find it weird that he's saying like, I don't know why the federal government's not saying what it is. They know what it is. Why aren't they saying? I don't know why he's doing that. I would love for him to clarify it. But when I start coming up with like probabilistic likelihoods of things that are happening, scenario one, the military tests drones out regularly that can break the laws of physics according to commercial aircraft that you and I have seen. That seems a high probability. Like you go back to the 90s. In the 1990s, me and Art Bell would get drunk and chain smoked on top of a hotel in Reno, and we'd watch these crazy ships floating around, and they looked like these like giant floating triangles, and they had lights on the bottom. It was crazy. Me and Art would just pound cigarettes staring at those. Those were stealth bombers. It's just that they weren't public knowledge at the time, but they violated the laws of physics according to anything that a civilian would know. So that's what I think is probably happening, Raiders. I think there's probably military grade aircraft that are being tested. It wouldn't surprise me at all if the Navy likes to fuck with the Army, or if the Army likes to fuck with the Navy. I think it's less likely that China's doing it, although it could happen. I wouldn't put it past them, but they wouldn't want their technology to be downed or shot out of the sky and then bring on an international incident or let us know what their technology is. So I think it's more likely that it's our guys testing out material on our guys. And I have to get through like 5 or 6 different iterations of probabilities before I go, aliens have come to New Jersey. I would love for that to happen. I just don't think it's happening.
All right, Jen. So at this point, Dexter is obviously in the pocket of big alien. Tell us the truth.
So I'm fucking around when I'm yelling aliens. I actually don't think this is aliens. Although, like, I'm working on another alien episode for Congressional Dish, and I'm like,
people love it, dude. You know why people will click on it every single time, because if you talk about aliens, man, his name is escaping me right now, but there's a congressional reporter who does a side hustle on Patreon where it's just tell me what you want me to ask any congressman, because I'll just add your question onto whatever I'm reporting on. By far away, the number one thing that he's asked to ask these people are about aliens.
Well, and I get it, because one of the things that I saw is that they had the head of AARO, which is the new Pentagon office that's supposed to be investigating aliens. And they come out and they're like, there's no evidence of aliens. And no senator went like, well, what about that guy that testified to the House and said that there are aliens? Like, there was no follow up whatsoever. So I would like to have some fucking follow up myself with these people. But I don't actually think this is aliens. My conspiracy theory is completely different. I also don't think that it's our military, because the military spokesman straight up said this isn't our military. So taking them at their word on that, they keep saying it's civil and commercial airplanes. I do think that's the case. I think this is a story that's being blown up on purpose by the White House and their partners, because they want congressional legislation that isn't moving forward. Because they pretty much straight up said that. John Kirby, who is the what's he, the spokesman?
National Security Advisor.
Yes,
he's for the Pentagon.
National Security Council spokesman. He straight up said, like, we've proposed this legislation to give state and local and federal authorities more, powers over policing drones. It hasn't gone anywhere. So I think we're at the end of the year. They have this CR that is now 1,500 pages long, full of dingleberries. I did look through the text this morning. Whatever they're fishing for, they did not get. And so there are still a few more opportunities. Like, we have the defense authorization that has to be done by the end of the year. The CR, as Justin talked about, like, it might not be law by Friday. Like, there are still things that can happen. So I think they're pushing for something. They're not being specific. But like Andrew said, you only really have to get the story started to have it catch fire. So I think this is more propaganda than something to fear.
Ask Buzz Aldrin about this one time. I've been able to meet Buzz a couple of times.
About aliens?
Yeah. Because like I had done, like, this is for, maybe I got drunk with Art Bell in the 90s, but for real, what I'm about to say. So when I was in New York, I got hired to write.
I love that you have to do a clarifier, because you're the boy who fucked Helen Mirren. You tell so many bullshit stories and bits that you have to be like, no, but for real, this interesting thing did happen.
Yeah. This is for, I'm not saying any of the other stuff didn't happen, but I'm saying this for real did. So when I was in New York, I got hired like as a side gig a few times for various outlets, and one of them was writing like listicle YouTube videos for some British media company, and one of them was astronauts who claim that they've seen aliens, or astronauts who claim that they've seen UFOs. So I had to compile this list of like 11 people, and then I had to make it funny, right? And one of them was Buzz Aldrin. You could find a clip on the Sci-Fi Channel where Buzz Aldrin, in the original mission where they're going to the moon, is looking out the window, and you can hear him going like, "Hey, Mission Control, we're seeing an object approaching us. Are you seeing this? Sounds really weird and fishy, right?" Yeah, but it's like 6 seconds. And I know enough about media manipulation to go, would love to know what's on either end of that. I would love to know what the greater context is. So I really wanted to ask Buzz Aldrin, do you think there are aliens? But Buzz Aldrin has a handler that will like pull the ripcord the second you do anything weird. So I was in the green room with him, and like I can like talk, oh, there's good cheese. How are you more of a mozzarella guy or a cheddar? You can do that shit. But if you say like, hey Buzz, what do you think about aliens? They're like, and we're done, because they don't want him to say anything that gets him in trouble. So I let in and I went, Colonel Aldrin, I was watching the Sci-Fi Channel and they had you apparently talking about an alien craft. And I thought that seems like they took it out of context. And I thought maybe they were mangling your words. And I wanted to see if you'd actually said that or if you'd said something different in context. And like, man, did I line that up correctly? He's like, absolutely. No, you got that exactly right. I was talking about the rocket splits into four parts, or the panels on the rocket fall off, and they're actually pursuing you at the same time because of the way physics work. I was seeing one out of the window, but I didn't want to freak out people on the ground, so I didn't want to say I'm afraid that's going to hit us. So what I just said was an object. And like, yes, you're right. I didn't see an alien up there. I didn't see a UFO. And I was like, great. Then like 5 minutes later, I snuck into the changing room, or like the makeup room. He wasn't putting on pants or anything. I was like, by the way, do you think aliens are real? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, when you think about the amount of billions upon billions of stars that exist in the galaxy and the billions upon billions of planets that exist, it would be incredibly unlikely in terms of statistics and probability that none of them have life. And if any of them have life, then some of them have intelligent life, then some of them have civilization. Do I think they've come to Earth? No, that would require every single government on the planet to agree to lie about this and never break its silence. And I said, yeah, even France. And then we laughed. So I have shit on France with Colonel Aldrin. But he has the same position I have, which is, yes, like if aliens don't exist, it means we're living in a simulation, or that God literally only created us. Those are pretty much the only two options I can think of. But the likelihood that they're here are very, very low.
I think we have a full diversity of opinion on this program, because I believe that in general, when it comes to a question of how the government is behaving, think not of what they are covering up, think not of what they are trying to push, but rather, how would this play out if it were an episode of Veep? Where they have no idea what the fuck's going on. They're all chasing their tail and they're all trying to just not get in trouble. And so we get the mishmash of everything that's happening right now. Jen, I very much hope to live in a world where the Biden White House is competent enough at this stage in the game that they are trying to push any kind of narrative for any kind of position. It would show a level of competency that we have not really seen over the last
earlier today. Joe
years.
Biden actually came to my house and he's like, "Hey, I locked the keys to the White House outside. I can't find them. Can I make a call from you?" It's like everybody's locked out of the White House right now. They're staying the first family staying at a La Quinta Inn in Bethesda, Maryland, until they find the copies.
I don't believe that the Department of Defense would tell us the truth if you out and out asked them whether or not there was something that was funded by DARPA that was being tested, because they have never told us the truth ever about anything.
Maybe we can audit them 6 times. I'm sure they'd pass every time.
Yeah. So it's like, here's my guess. You had a few things that were legit in Jersey where it was a shop that was testing a thing that is either bidding for or under contract with DARPA for some kind of drone technology. They didn't want to say that. And then what you have seen since then is an absolute cavalcade of people looking at stars and airplanes and taking pictures of them late at night and saying, "Oh my God, the drones are over my house too." I do think there's an element of, quote unquote mass hysteria. Like there's just lights in the sky and people have taken pictures of them. But I do think that there are a few things that were legit that the government does not want to talk about for the same reasons that the government doesn't want to talk about. Y'all remember there was the jetpack man in LA like 3 years ago or 4 years ago?
No.
Yeah, refresh my memory.
There were pilots that were flying into LAX and they were like, "Is there a jetpack guy like around like this flight path?" Because pilots were seeing it. And so nobody wound up mentioning anything ever again. If you actually look at what DARPA does need to make public, the kind of technology that they are looking for, so people will bid on it. and then they will say, okay, well, we can make X, Y, or Z. It's exactly what DARPA was looking for. But nobody will ever say, oh, yeah, that was a DARPA project that we were looking to solicit bids for. So somebody was either testing it or was under contract for us to eventually develop it, because there's a lot of money in getting money from DARPA to develop this technology. I'm guessing it's something like that. Drones are a huge part of our military going forward. You've got a lot of people that are working on it, and it's not just off the rack stuff like Anduril. There's a lot of stuff that's being paid for by the Department of Defense. And spoiler alert, they let us believe that aliens crashed in Roswell, New Mexico for 50 years before saying, oh, we have a nuclear testing facility in New Mexico, and we have a lot of technology that we would not like our enemies to understand. So there we go. That's my
denying
supposition.
Area 51. I remember, when I was a kid, I asked somebody in the Air Force about that. And he got really bent out of shape, and he's like, "There is no Area 51. It's stupid." Nope. Turns out there is an Area 51. Yes. They test new crafts there. That's why me and Art Bell were able to see crazy shit in the desert when we were drinking ether in the 90s.
Yeah, they can't stop us all. Clapping alien cheeks. Remember that? That was a fun time.
That was fun. That was like a really charming. That was actually like a charming example of American government and secret military bases. Like, because everybody showed up there, and like somebody pretended to be an alien, and then like a guy came out with a bullhorn and like, all right, we're gonna do a foot race. Like nobody got shot. Like, because I was like, ooh, I wouldn't bum rush an Air Force base where they're testing secret military, but they had some intern come out, like take photos with everybody. That was nice.
Have you guys ever seen the series Documentary Now?
Yeah, it's about half of it. Very funny.
That's where I always think of whenever drones. So Documentary Now was Fred Armisen and Bill Hader did a series for IFC where every episode was a parody of a famous documentary. Or documentary style. And one of the styles was the Vice documentaries that were very popular at the time. But instead of Vice, it was drones. And so it was these like two dudes that were just like, drones, we're going to do these. And so it's like, the running gag is that they keep sending two people and it's the same two people, but because they're trying to do this guerrilla journalism with gangs in Mexico, they keep getting killed, and they just send two new Brooklyn dipshits to go push further. And then the one line that I always remember in that episode is they finally meet the head of this cartel, and they're just like doing coke with him, and there's like wow, man, I haven't done this much coke since Betsy's barbecue last summer. Like, yeah, that was the last time that I did this much coke. Anyway, very funny. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com, drones. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com. Commercial viewer writes, I can't stand being behind on sports. An app, a friend, a text, something is bound to ruin that my team has failed yet again. Go Rams. I don't like commercials, but I hate being behind on live sports anymore. Point for me.
You just have to put your phone on Do Not Disturb. You'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sure. Let's be Amish for an hour. Sure. Exactly. Is Justin okay? Watch. Writes, willingly watching commercials in 2024. Are you okay? You can skip, pause, mute, or pay to avoid them in almost every platform. It's crazy to watch and pay attention to them. I don't listen to them. I have a computer and a phone. I have plenty of ways to distract myself. I'm not sitting like a toddler in front of the television and watching every single commercial. It's fucking insane. Jen is right.
You're burning time.
Burning time. You're behind on that. You're artificially creating an advantage for yourself. It's not an advantage at all.
I'm watching every play. If I really want to, I can time it so that for the last quarter, I'm on time. So I walk the dog, I come back. Like, there's ways to do this to where the important part that you want to see live, you see live. But who gives a fuck about the first quarter?
Jen is right. Writes, Jen is 1000% right. Pause the game and do something to skip the commercials.
There we go.
Insane. Who skips the commercials, right? Who takes the time to skip ads? That means you're spending way more time thinking about ads than us normal people who just tune out the TV. Fantastic.
Incorrect. Tune out the TV, so you're just sitting there like pretending not to listen for like that hour within the game.
You're doing your own stuff.
Yeah.
Or
and
if
that's
you have the
exactly what I'm
quad,
doing.
like I do, if you have the quad, you just change the audio to the game that's still playing. And so the commercial just plays haplessly in 1/4 of your screen.
So that works during the day, but when you have Sunday night football or Monday night football with no doubleheader, like when you have just one game, you're just there watching the commercials. I'd rather start it an hour later.
You're ridiculous.
You're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong. And you should feel
doing it
bad about
wrong.
it. You're doing it wrong.
I'm not wrong.
The Portland strip club across from the motel writes, Justin, I think you're thinking about Union Jacks across from the East Side Lodge. 100%. Yes, that is exactly the Portland strip club that I was thinking of.
Shout out to Union Jacks. That actually sounds like a strip club I would hang out at.
Union Jacks is that is an experience. That entire area of East Portland, I've been to many times. I love that drag of things, bars, restaurants, and indeed Union Jacks, the crown jewel of East Portland. Let's talk about the killing of the healthcare CEO. First time, long time writes, would love to be able to hear Justin in 1859 explaining how John Brown just ensured slavery would last another century. Hundreds of millions of people in medical debt and national news medical horror stories haven't stained the insurance companies' political lobbying, as you said yourself. This is just a pre-Christmas topic, so why all the concern? I mean, it's a pre-Christmas topic. So if we are talking about this after Christmas, then I owe you a Coke, listener. One More Day writes, every now and then there needs to be a revolution from above, as in the politics of Otto von Bismarck and FDR, or culturally in the works of Edward Bernays. But the maximalists of the current residencies of the C-suite isn't going to end well for society. Executives doubling down into the decisions that are infuriating the public and working under the assumption they get nothing and they will like it are going to find out what pitchforks and torches being wielded by the peasants, or whatever the 21st century equivalent will be.
My issue with some of this rhetoric, like, okay, if we're making two different tracks here, we've got kind of an orthogonal line of thought of the morality of killing people, or x-axis morality of killing people, y-axis are people frustrated because of our healthcare system. Yes, you can, like, absolutely, people are very frustrated because of our healthcare system. Their frustration is very warranted, and there might be practical consequences to that. If that's a conversation we're having, okay, I think that's what Elizabeth Warren was getting at. I don't think she actually thought you should, shoot anybody. The problem I have with when I start hearing things about how this is so intransigent that we have to resort to violence, and I've seen those comments a lot online of the political process has failed us. We now have to take this into our own hands. That to me seems indistinguishable from why you shouldn't go shoot a congressman or the president. Because as we talked about on today's program, we have an intransigent political system with gerrymandered districts. We have all sorts of problems that we regularly talk about on the show about why it's difficult to get change in political reform because of rigged things that are in there. And I'm not for assassinating politicians to try to change that. So I get worried when we get into that realm. I don't see the ethical difference between political assassinations versus business assassinations to try to affect change.
Allegedly writes, I was very disappointed in the way that you guys handled the Luigi Mangione CEO assassin story. Mangione is the alleged or suspected assassin. He was found several days later, nearly 300 miles away from the shooting. Justin said that he read Mangione's manifesto, but as of this writing, there's been no official release of any evidence tying Mangione to the CEO assassination. Mangione's lawyer has stated that he has yet to see the evidence that has been levied against his client, and Mangione himself is on the record accusing police of planting evidence on him. I will say, I do apologize for this. I did not go to a journalism school and take the comm law class to not have appropriately said, allegedly. That is incorrect at the time that we recorded last week. As of this week, he has officially been charged as the assassin as of a couple days ago. So now he is still the alleged assassin, but at least there has been a charge levied from the state of New York for it. But indeed, we should have said alleged. I should have said alleged. So
yeah, it's fair criticism.
Fair point.
Yeah.
what providers charge, right? Providers charge outrageous prices because insurance is going to pay whatever, and all insurances pay a different amount. This can be vastly different, and insurance companies have providers sign a contract that bar you from sharing how much they pay per service. We do not get our claims denied because of what we charge. Heaton, that is wrong. But as a provider, I write off a lot of money every year from just not being paid by insurance for whatever reason they want. For example, code 90387, 50 plus minutes of psychotherapy is the most common code billed, and providers will regularly have this denied if you bill it too much for a client, and they will want you to bill another code, which would be for 30 minutes of therapy. I don't know if you've done therapy, but 30 minutes isn't much time.
So, listener, I do not doubt that you are refraining from billing people for egregious amounts in hopes that the insurance will just give you money. I'm sure that you are a good person. That being said, doctors too are self-interested, as are all people, but autocentric, whatever term you want to use. This is a part of the problem. I don't think of this in terms of bad guys. I think of this in terms of incentives. When I approach political economy, I'm not trying to find bad agents and then hit them like whack-a-mole to fix the problem. I'm trying to figure out what is the underlying incentive structure. The incentive structure we have, as evidenced by your email, is a very bad one. The fact that you're not trying to rip anybody off, but you also overbill because you don't know how much the insurers are going to pay you back is, to me, a very good indication that this is a poor model and a poor incentive structure. Now, that being said, I think that has happened and probably does happen. When Medicare first got started, I think we talked about this last week, but when Medicare first got started, the deal that the federal government made with health providers was don't use a profit model, just do cost plus for this. Tell us how much your thing cost, and we'll do that plus 2%. You'll just get a tidy 2%. What happened? Everybody went, well, I'm going to use a gold-plated scalpel. I'm going to invite in 8 of my friends to give a second opinion, and I'm going to inflate the cost of this because that's how I'm going to get paid more. And you saw the cost of medicine increase after Medicare was increased. Now, I think they've come up with things to iron that out, so it's not just a simple thing. But you also just couldn't have a system where doctors just give a bill to the insurance company, whether the insurance company is Medicare or whether it's a private company or a nonprofit or whatever, and just have them go, great, thanks, there you go. Because you would have people that would abuse that. So I reiterate my position. I don't think having an insurance model for non-insurance purposes is a good idea. Insurance works great as a risk pool for low probability, unforeseen circumstances. It's a really dumb way to meter out health services. And I would rather just scrap it and have a private vertical and a public vertical.
What insurance companies charge? Oh, wait, no, I already read that. Oh. No. What insurance companies charge? I was right. Hospitals have to charge higher rates because of low insurance reimbursement. This affects people without insurance or bad insurance to offset the cost to the people. This has affected the conversation with insurance companies. I work in healthcare, and I'm already hearing this from our CEO, which is the largest healthcare provider in my state. Look at BCBS. The insurance companies often will decide the appropriate care for a patient rather than the provider. This causes extra time, not paid, to advocate for PTS patients to get the care. To those of you accusing hospitals or doctors for this, you need to step back and actually look at what's going on. If insurance companies actually did their job, then all costs would actually go down. This is a multi-pronged problem, and I see this as an odd argument that takes the blame off of insurance companies.
I have seen a lot of doctor blaming in this conversation, and not you, Andrew. I mean, like the national conversation. And I think these doctors' offices, we have to take into account that like they're doing what's best for their patient. And the deal in the contracts is that they are supposed to be able to turn in these bills and get them paid by the insurance companies. It's not supposed to be denied the way that they're denied. And like the amount of money that the doctors' offices have to pay to stay in compliance with this system. Like they have entire staff members whose only job is to deal with these insurance companies and advocate for their patients to get the coverage that they literally need. So the idea that it's the doctors that are just overcharging or like ordering unnecessary tests, like that's just not the problem here. Like, does it happen? Probably. Can we crack down on that? Yeah. But when we're talking about the big systemic issue, That's not it. The issue is that we have this insane payment system and they're trying to find their way in it. And so if this payment system involves a ton of denials, but they know that they can get money in this other way, like the problem is the insurance being our administrators. That is the root of the problem. That is the seed that all the other problems come out from. So, yeah, this isn't the doctor's fault. The doctors are just trying to treat their patients. It's the insurance company's fault. I think sometimes you have to put the blame where it belongs or else you don't solve anything. And I think they are the root cause of all the other issues we're having right now.
All countries ration care, writes. In our country, we've chosen to do that with a mix of private insurance companies and government. Between Medicare, Medicaid, military, Indian Health Service, VA, and federal, state, local employees, the government already controls more than half of healthcare already. Plus, health insurance companies have state and federal laws and regulations and state insurance commissioners. The ACA banned doctors from owning hospitals, despite that those hospitals being more cost effective than business people running hospitals. It also mandates that only 20% of money coming to the insurance companies can be used for administrative costs, such as salaries. This discourages insurance companies from doing anything to lower costs, as that makes the pie bigger than the 20%. When somebody else pays, we tend to overconsume. This makes all prices go up. So often, even if somebody wanted to pay cash, it is very expensive. Patients often will want everything done, even if there really isn't a reason for it. Everyone with fatigue wants their hormones checked. 3-year-old children don't really make estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone, and they don't have fatigue. Everyone wants an MRI before they get a physical exam.
Okay, 2 things with that. Let's start with the first one. And I'm glad that this, because this is Republican talking points. I hear them all the time in Congress. So I'm glad we get to address them, especially the one that like government controls so much of our system already. When it comes to administration, that is not true. The only one really right now is classic Medicare. That is like the checks are cut by the government. And that's one of the reasons that you see overbilling of Medicare, because it's one of the few areas, even though they don't generally pay great rates, it's one of the few areas where the doctor turns in the bill and they get paid for it. So there is a privatization that is happening with our government systems and has been happening for a long time. So you have classic Medicare, but now you have Medicare Advantage, which PSI to enter, not PSA, to anyone who is either elderly or has elderly people in your family, you do not want Medicare Advantage plans because you're essentially giving up your rights to having actual Medicare. And these are privately administered plans. Now, the way that they get you into them is you'll see these commercials online that are like, oh, Medicare doesn't cover your eyeglasses, or do you want a gym membership? And then people don't understand that they're giving up their classic Medicare. It puts them right back into the private administration system. And that is when you hear like, oh, Medicare denies claims too. No, it's these private companies that are administering Medicare Advantage plans. We have $500 billion approximately every year that is going to pay Medicare Advantage. And of course, there's the profit tax that goes into the shareholders of the private companies that are administering those plans. Medicaid, which is healthcare for poor people. That is administered based on what the states want to do. And there are plenty of states in our union that have decided to, you've guessed it, have those plans administered by private insurance companies. So once again, federal tax dollars are paying for it, but there is a profit tax that is going into the coffers of the shareholders of those companies. We also now have the Veterans Choice Act. The idea behind it kind of makes some sense because there are rural communities where we have veterans and it takes a long time for them to get to the VA. But instead of opening satellite Veterans Administration offices and having like the government actually take care of that, because veterans do like their VA care, they just don't like waiting for it. Instead of opening satellite offices, they instead open the door to privatization of the Veterans Administration. So you're kind of seeing that now, that you have veterans that are now getting treated in the private sector. So there's this mission creep. So the idea that the government is controlling all of this healthcare, it's not true. They're contracting out the administration in a lot of different ways, even in the parts of our system that we think are government. So there's that. And then second of all, you mentioned that if you have free healthcare, that people will just use it too much. Should we be so blessed to have that be the issue in the United States? I would welcome tackling that problem. That is not where we are. We are at the point that people are rationing their own care for fear of bills. I've done it myself. So like right now I have a hurt wrist. I'm guessing that it's tendinitis, but I haven't actually gone to the doctor because that's not part of my preventative care. God only knows what the bills is. Like if they're going to x-ray me, could that be hundreds of dollars? So I'm just kind of treating myself. In the past, when Joe and I didn't have money, he had really bad chest pains when we lived in Waikiki. And we knew that we could go full blown bankrupt if we called an ambulance. So we called a cab to take him to the hospital. Now he survived. He had pericarditis, which is when like the sac that your heart is in gets inflamed. It feels like a heart attack, but luckily it wasn't. But we risked his life because we were afraid of bankruptcy. And then when it happened 2 years later in Boston, we gave him some ibuprofen, prayed overnight, and then took him to the doctors the next day because, once again, we were afraid of being bankrupted by calling an ambulance. That doesn't happen in other countries. And there is story after story after story after story that have been shared all over the country in the last few weeks of people saying, I didn't get my care because I was afraid of the bills. Cancer patients saying, I decided to just not treat my cancer at all because I didn't want to leave my family with the bills if I died. Like, this is what the problem is in the United States right now. So let's not have a conversation about people overusing their care. Like if a doctor wants to give you an MRI because they're afraid that your headache is actually an aneurysm, they should be able to do that. I'm not afraid of over testing people. I'm afraid of under testing people and having the aneurysms blow up. So let's tackle the problems that are our biggest problems. And then if we get to the point that our healthcare is so good that people are using it too much, we'll deal with that time when it comes.
Listener, I agree with the central thesis of your point that rationing occurs in any system with limited resources. Whether we want the government to do that or we want consumers to do that, there's still going to be somebody rationing resources. There's a limited amount of time that doctors have. There's a limited amount of money that they can have for any given operation or pharmaceutical. So rationing is going to exist. I think this is a salient point. As I've said, I want to have a public and a private model. But in both of those, there's going to be rationing that happens. There's going to be trade-offs for folks that want to just have a public model or just have Medicare for all or something like that. Rationing still happens. It doesn't go away. It's not an artificial construct which exists only in private systems. It's going to happen in any system. And so what I want to have is I would take Medicaid and Medicare. I would turn them into actual public health care, like with TRICARE or something like that, or publicly funded clinics like they've got in Germany. And I would have a much more unfettered, nationalized market, nationalized in the sense that it's along national lines as opposed to state market for private healthcare. And I would have a lot of like private doctors that aren't dealing with healthcare insurance companies at all. A quick question, Jen, with the profit tax, do you think like Kaiser Permanente and Blue Cross Blue Shield are significantly different and better given that they're nonprofits?
I don't know. But I also know that Blue Cross Blue Shield is not fully nonprofit. They have nonprofit arms, which I think you're a part of, but they're not fully nonprofit. But I can tell you when you have the diversion of profits that happen in like United Healthcare and a lot of the other big companies, like there are billions of dollars that we are putting towards healthcare that are instead going to shareholders. And I think that diversion and the fiduciary duty going to shareholders instead of patients, like this is just one area where it should be eliminated. This isn't something that the market can take care of. So it's like when it comes to Kaiser,
if we want to make them all nonprofits, not have dividends, I don't think it would functionally change very much, but it wouldn't bother me that much if we wanted to have Kaiser Permanente as opposed to United.
Well, I think that the denial of cares or the denial of claims would be different if there wasn't a profit model, because right now the goal of these companies is to take as much in premiums as they possibly can and pay out as little as possible in healthcare because they get to keep that difference. And so I think that motivation being eliminated would help. That said, I think the simpler solution here, based on someone whose parents are both over 65 and like Medicare, we all were so relieved when they hit 65 and they were able to get Medicare. People are generally quite happy with their Medicare. It's a very simple solution to just change the eligibility age from 65 to birth. And that way, if you want to have private insurance instead, you can go right ahead, but you have access to this Medicare system. Like, I just want access to it. Let me choose Medicare if I want to. And if you want to have the private insurance for whatever reason, because they're going to cover other things or faster, visits because you're in their network or whatever the fuck, that's fine. But right now we don't have the option to choose Medicare if we're under the age of 65. And that's, I think, all I'm asking for. And if we want to solve this very quickly with a system that already exists, I think that's a good way to do it. And then you have all these people that are already experts in the pushing of the paper. Because if you're working at a doctor's office, you need to know the Medicare system, the Medicaid system. You need to know all the insurance systems, like all that shit. We could hire them, basically make it a government jobs program. But the administration, you would just basically shift those people from the private sector to the public sector, expand Medicare. We can actually do this quite quickly. So I think that's why so many people are focusing on Medicare for all, because it's a solution that could solve this so fast. And that's why I like it too.
This is a fun one because I'm more lefty than Jen on this. I don't want a public-private partnership the way we have it under Medicare, where you've got private, nonprofit, and for-profit doctors paired with a public insurance model. I think the insurance model itself is very bad. So I don't want to double down on it under Medicare and go, well, but it's public insurance. I just want to get the insurance actually to be insurance. I will say, though, it is an existing thing. I think, like, from a legislative perspective, that's probably a lot more practical than building public clinics, which is what I would do. But I, again, a lot of the endemic problems that we see with having an insurance model pay for things, I see replicated writ large if we were to go the Medicare route. I would rather have publicly funded hospitals, publicly funded clinics, things like that.
What I'm loving about this conversation is that we are finding such broad agreement here. Like, we've identified that there's a problem. We've identified some really good solutions. Like, I feel like we've been there for a long time. And if we could get the people in Washington on the same page, I actually do think there are solutions for this, and it doesn't have to take forever. So I am kind of hopeful. And that's why I like that this conversation is happening.
You know what would be a really easy legislative solution from the federal perspective? If your state can accomplish universal health care, it can do whatever it wants. Like if Vermont tried to do single payer, it didn't end up working. This is one of my things is, like, I would exempt, if a state could pull off universal health care, we exempt people in the state from paying Medicaid, Medicare, or we lower it or something to offset the costs of that. But I would love for there to be more experimentation going on. I think there's going to have to be federal government involved in this. I don't think it'll work because the states will cookie cutter out all the insurance companies so they can't work across state lines anyway. But yes, I agree, Jen. I think there's a broad agreement that the insurance model is not a good one. And that the incentive structure is bad, and we could do something better.
Brian Thompson did not deserve to be murdered, writes, this would be my opinion for all people killed, including people sentenced to death. I also do not care that he was killed or have any sympathy for them. I do feel sympathy for anyone close to him that is dealing with his passing. I also hope Luigi Mangione is acquitted due to jury nullification. I think it's gross how much money and time went into this case so far. A rich dude died, so everyone went at high alert, while the other 20-ish murders in New York City that month, nobody bats an eye at.
Can I take this one? Because I only said this in the Patreon and I think it needs to be heard. Assuming Luigi did it, because he allegedly did it. Assuming that he did, he deserves to go to jail possibly for life for first degree murder. He murdered a guy in cold blood. So it's like, even though I do think that Brian Thompson is a form of a mass murderer, and you know, I said what I said last week and I wholeheartedly believe it, that still doesn't mean that you get to go and kill the dude. Like, there was a guy who killed Jeffrey Dahmer in prison. He didn't have the right to do that, even though he was killing Jeffrey Dahmer. So it's, murder is still bad. This is not the way that we solve this. And like, there are consequences to doing what Luigi did. And if I were on the jury, I would convict him and punish him harshly.
I got two pieces of advice for listeners that want change in terms of the current healthcare model that does not involve a bullet, and I think would be far more effective. One, if you want to get people to come over to whatever your position is, whether it be Medicare for all, single payer healthcare, whatever that thing is, just ask people about any bad experiences they've had with health insurance. And I think you'll find that a lot of rock-ribbed Republicans will have incredibly long, detailed stories that they want to talk to you. And then if you're talking to somebody like me who likes markets and thinks markets can solve problems a lot, just ask us, so in what ways is the healthcare model right now not a market? Like, how is it not functioning as a market? And then that'll get us thinking like, oh shit, this isn't actually a thing that we like. This is this weird Frankenstein's monster.
Maybe don't make the consensus also agree that murder's cool.
Great. I agree.
I don't know. I'm just a fucking dork, though. What do I know? Not everything needs to be a market, right? Whenever you discuss how to fix healthcare, you always bring up that the solution is to allow companies to compete across state lines. While I can agree that that should be a thing in general, because sure, why not? What makes you think that it wouldn't end the same way that it has for cable companies that already can compete nationwide, but don't, and instead hold on to an agreed upon local monopoly system? I don't believe lifting the state competition clauses would fix anything. I'm going to take this.
Is this for me or Jen? Please go ahead, Justin. Oh, is it for you? Okay, yeah.
It's for me because I'm the one who says that all the time. Yeah. And also the person who wrote this picked the worst possible comparison.
I agree. This is not an apt comparison because you're talking about, please take it away.
Cable companies have maintained local monopolies because they deal with local municipalities. They deal with cities and they deal with counties for the ability to tunnel and dig and lay lines or put lines that connect houses up through the city maintained power lines. There are examples, very good examples, including right here in Austin, where market forces radically changed the price of internet. As soon as Google came in and announced that they were doing Google Fiber, all of a sudden, Time Warner decided, oh, yeah, no, we can do fiber. There were federally mandated, there was money that went out for people to do fiber, for these companies to do fiber, and they dragged their feet until there was anything close to market pressure for them to actually apply these funds and put the infrastructure in place. So there are realities to cable. There are realities to these organizations that theoretically would not exist in terms of healthcare, which is a more actuarial table profession that then contracts with all of these hospitals and doctors across the country. There's no reason other than
it's not geographically
artificial
bound.
Lawmaking. Yeah. Yes, there's no reason other than the fact that that is our system right now to make these people compete. And should they compete nationwide, I do believe that there would be a market effect in bringing this down.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Like that, like you're talking about physical infrastructure with cable companies. That's a big part of the problem. Like I spent part of COVID in Wagner, Oklahoma, and Wagner is a small county. Wagner's a small town out in rural Oklahoma. There was one broadband provider. They were overpriced and it was horrible. It was like 5 megabytes per second. You were paying like whatever you guys are paying in Austin. I was getting charged that for like email level stuff. And it's gotten better since then. But the reason that exists in that particular model is because it doesn't make sense for cable providers to go, there's 80 people in this town. We're going to go compete with 3 other companies over those 80. Yeah. Why would they bother putting in those resources? It just doesn't make any sense, right? So we can talk about maybe the public should get involved in that model because it's a market failure. I'm here for that. But as Justin rightly points out, with health insurance, we're talking about actuarial models. So if you want to use your internet model, this would be like saying right now there are 5 to 10 different Starlink companies that are all independent that exist in all 50 states and they cannot operate in other states. What Justin and I are saying is let them operate in other states and be able to just get it directly. That would competition's a good thing. I am anti-monopoly, and health insurance companies are given a federal exemption from monopoly law so that they don't actually have to compete with one another. That is batshit insane, in my opinion. I would like for them to be able to compete with each other. I'm here in Virginia. I just did the open enrollment thing. I can't choose a different company later on in the year. If my company, my health insurance company, I'm going to go with Kaiser Permanente. If they piss me off, I literally can't change it later on in the year. And that would be good. I like that competition. I like if somebody fucks up, I can change options, but I'm bound by federal law presently where I can only do it during an enrollment window. That's not on the companies. That's on the federal government. And then I'm also bound by what's operating in the states in terms of what can actually be accessed there. That's something where you want to get them all competing. If you don't like health insurance companies, you want them to fight each other to get your money because that's going to lower the prices.
I don't disagree with any of that. I just want to point out that like the Affordable Care Act, it made things better, right? Like the Democrats, they used so much political capital and they got it done and they put some rules on the insurance companies, which aren't being enforced, but like whatever, made some things better. These solutions might help a little bit in the same way that the ACA did, but the problem is they're still just tinkering with a shit system. So if we're going to use our own political capital and argue for something, we should tackle the big issue, which is the administration being administered at all by the insurance company. So this is just a solution that's not really a solution. It's dancing around the edges. It's tinkering with a shitty system. Let's change the root problem, which is the administration being done by insurance companies at all.
Understood. Recovering corporate lawyer writes, the CEO assassination discussion is interesting. I agree with Jen that support for the shooter reflects desperation and disgust with our current system. I also agree with Heaton that there probably isn't a silver bullet solution. With that in mind, I wonder if a shift towards stakeholder capitalism would push us in the right direction. Corporate law, especially in Delaware, has traditionally been interpreted to require executives to put the interests of shareholders above all else. But there's also been a push in recent years among academics and even some judges to move toward a stakeholder model where executives and boards can consider a wider range of interests, e.g. employees, the environment, customers, in addition to shareholders. Under a stakeholder model, executives could theoretically be in breach of fiduciary duty if they authorize practices that fail to consider harm to consumers. This probably won't happen without changes to state-level corporate law structures. Thankfully, state-level representatives are often more responsive to constituent demands. Maybe Jen should move to Delaware and become the fearless leader we need but do not deserve to run a scorched earth campaign to fix the system here first.
Yeah, right after I'm done with Southwest Airlines, right, guys? Then I'll move to Delaware. It's absolutely bananas to me that we allow these corporations to only serve their shareholders. They're so big now, like so many of these corporations that we call American are actually multinational. They don't just affect what happens in our country, they affect what happens in the world. And we cannot just have the fiduciary duty be to shareholders, because essentially the stock market, I don't know if this is how it was originally set up to work, but how it functions now, it is a wealth transfer mechanism from us as consumers to the top. I see profit at this point, especially for stock market traded companies, as a bit of a tax. Everything that you buy, there is a profit tax, and it's just taking money from your pocket through the stock market to the people who are richer than you. And I do think that other stakeholders, especially when you're talking about something like healthcare, like the patients should be factored in. It shouldn't be, let's maximize the returns to these people who don't even actually do any work for the company and don't treat the patient. So I think that this would be helpful not only in healthcare, but in our entire world. And if we can make this on the federal level so that we don't have to do the state by state, even better. But I do think this would make our entire world economy a more moral economy.
I fundamentally disagree with Jen's analysis of how the stock market works, but I haven't taken any beta blockers, so I'm not going to fight on that one. What I will say is that the essence of the stakeholder conversation, I think, is fine. But I would like for there to be lots of options, and I would like the ability to choose between them as a consumer. So if we're talking about like a grocery store, I've worked for a co-op before. I liked it. It treated its employees really, really well. When I'm in the United Kingdom, I'm probably a little bit more likely to go shop at the co-op because I know how good they treat everybody. Probably going to pay a little bit more, and I'd like to be able to make the decision on that. If we're talking about insurance models, like I think car insurance is a far more functional market that's pretty straightforward. If you want to have a car insurance company that goes, look, we're not about dividends, we're about taking care of our employees, making sure we take care of consumers, that's great. I think that's really, really good. I might very well use that. But also if it's like $200 a month more than Geico, I'd probably just use Geico. So yay to there being lots of different economic models. I don't think that profit maximization is everything, but I think that the main element to consider is whether or not we're compelling everybody to adopt this system, or we're offering a variety of things. If you want to start one of these, that sounds great. Maybe I'll join it. Maybe I won't.
Let's talk about beards. Weirdo writes, after years of being clean shaven because number one, I didn't know any better. Number two, my first jobs required all men to be clean shaven for safety reasons. When you work in a refinery, you need to be able to put on a respirator or an SCBA at a moment's notice. I decided to let my facial hair grow when I moved to a corporate role. Wasn't popular at the time, but I figured I'd give it a try with my supportive wife. It only took a week before I had a full beard, although patchy and thin, but I felt so much better. I finally felt like me. Also, I consider myself terminally unhip, so I didn't care that I was the weirdo in the office. I also listen to extreme metal. I love baseball and I love math. How much weirder can you get?
You do you, boo. You do what makes you happy.
I agree. We're not wrong pod at gmail.com.
You're nailing it, guy. Grow that hair out to your waist.
Yeah, dude. tie it around there, make it a little belt.
The second I pop a baby in some lady and convince her to marry me, I'm going to put on 200 pounds and grow out my hair to my ankles.
Is that the order it's going to happen in?
Yeah.
Baby first?
Yep. I'll be like, sorry, you're in Texas. We're keeping it. Also, we're getting married.
Heat and fucks raw, dude.
Yep.
On that note, Merry Christmas.
He busts on the first date. No condom. That's it. If you want to know about Heaton.
Yep. He wants to trap you, ladies.
Mm-hmm. So much like a man to want to impregnate a woman and then take responsibility for the baby.
That's it.
The new age anchor baby.
We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Our editor is Will Saddleberg. On this week's PX3, we have Bill Scher of Washington Monthly to talk about whether or not Kamala Harris 2028 is where we are headed as a nation.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
I concur with my esteemed colleague, Jen. The fuck are you talking about?
Well, you'll have to listen to find out. And on Friday's edition of the show, Musa Al-Gharbi, who, by the way, Jen, I think you should read Musa Al-Gharbi's new book, We Have Never Been Woke.
I think you'd really like it.
I think it is. I almost really, really wish. Musa's a great thinker. The book is phenomenal. There's a reason why it's gotten the kind of response that it's gotten. And I would like to, I think he's a much larger man than I am, but if I could hold him upside down and shake him until his naming functions fell out of his pocket and he was never able to find them again, I think it would be better, because the substance of what he is talking about are effectively class lines that have erupted throughout not only Western society, but American society in particular. And I think that it is something that you would very much cotton to. And it is unfortunate that woke is even in the title of it, because it makes it sound like it's a screed against something.
It is like a conservative, like, what? How many genders are there? It's not that. Like, if he were calling it something dry, he would have called it Elite Overproduction Theory, the book. That would have been it. But it's fascinating. I do think you'd enjoy it. And it's a great book. It explains all the stuff, but it's not dry. Like, it's well written.
It is an academic text that is written about as pop culture as you can write an academic text. So it's all the sourcing of an academic text, and it's also readable because he's a good writer. So check that out.
I would genuinely love to get Jen, your interpretation of that. Because like if I was going to form a book club where Jen and I could talk about economics but not fight, that book would probably be my pick, because I think that we would both have insights onto it, but it's like, it's not talking about fundamental political economy, but it is talking about class lines, and it is talking about kind of the nature of all. It's interesting stuff. I would love to get your thoughts on it.
All right, anyway, I'm buying it right
Musa
now
Al-Gharbi,
on Audible.
Before the man wrote the book, before he was on every podcast, he came on PX3 to talk about the demographic lines of the 2020 election. And so now, because he always remembers the real ones, he came back on the show and he talked about the 2024 demographic trends. And it's fascinating. It is, especially in light of having read at least the first fifth of the book. It is awesome to see that applied to where the actual demographics shook out, and the lies that we tell each other as to why Joe Biden won and why Donald Trump won this time.
Jen, if you read that, we can do that as a book club episode on Patreon, and then Justin and I don't have to work. Yeah.
All right. I just bought it. So
because I think I'm on board with him, Justin. I read the book and was like, yeah, like that was a new theory to me. And I'm like, this makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Basically, that's the other name that he uses a lot is symbolic capitalist, which
that part
I think is
knowledge worker. Call it a knowledge worker, you fuck.
Yeah,
I love Musa. I love Musa. We would have totally been on the same D&D team if we'd been in high school. He's a total dork. I love the guy. But yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's great. Jen.
Aliens on Congressional Dish. Yep. So I'm continuing my efforts to pretend the Trump administration isn't happening. And so I watched 2 more alien hearings. And so, and it was interesting. Like, one of them had more whistleblowers. We have a new well, apparently not new, but a program called Immaculate Constellation, which is, I know, it's a pretty good name. So we have information about that. And then we have all the denials from Arrow, and I'm putting it all into one episode, which will be the follow-up to my first Alien episode. It's some fun stuff. And my motivation for this is like, if you just don't want to talk about politics, but you want to like veer the conversation to something that like is more fun, like you can actually get congressional testimony to help you with those conversations. It'll be a fun episode. I'm going to be done with it as soon as I possibly can. So, but before Christmas for sure.
Heats.
I also have a non-political episode on the political orphanage this week, and I am discussing aliens. I'm not discussing aliens. I'm not doing that. I have, but I'm not doing it this time. No, what I'm doing is I brought on a guy to just talk about like where weird traditions in Christmas come from. So, for example, like, you guys know that carol, Here We Come a Wassailing, Here We Come a Wassailing, a Wassailing.
Yes.
You know that one? I was like,
I thought it was waffling.
Yeah, most people do, right? And I brought on a guy that's researched the hell out of Christmas. And I was like, what is waffling? What is wassailing? And he's like, wassailing is this ancient Celtic pagan practice where you would go into an orchard and like scare evil spirits away by singing. And then it kind of got co-opted where it became like a class thing where the poor peasants would go to somebody's house and like scare away evil spirits in exchange for booze. And then it like, but it's like this, there's all these things we do at Christmas that are really, really ancient, weird practices. Like I'm like mistletoe. Y'all ever thought about why we allegedly kiss under mistletoe, or we did until the 80s and guys fucked it up and HR said we couldn't do it anymore? Like I talked about that. I'm like, what is mistletoe? Why are we doing that? I found out what garlands are. When you put like popcorn around a tree, it is fucking disgusting. It is gory and disgusting. It involves blood and the Norse, and it's awesome. And so that's what I'm talking about on the political orphanage this week. Hey, friends that listen to the show, if you are looking for conversational fodder with your family coming up on Christmas, it's not political at all. We're just talking about Christmas. This is the exact kind of thing you can stock up on as you're driving to your home, so that when you go there, you can be like, hey, do you know why we do this particular thing, Dad? You talk about that. That's the point of the episode. It's a lot of fun.
That's so good. I love that.
Thank you.
By the way, programming note, dear listeners, next week's edition of the program, which would normally be recorded on Christmas, will not be recorded with the three of us, but instead we will be offering a sampler platter of our respective shows. So we're each going to give a little present. So unless you are an absolute obsessive that listens to all three of our shows and this show every single week, then there will probably be at least one thing that is new to you and you will be able to enjoy. So that will be the case, although we will have a new Patreon episode. So this is a reason. If you want a little We're Not Wrong hit, this is a reason to jump on over that paywall. But until then, friends, for Andrew Heaton and Jen Briney, my name is Justin Robert Young, reminding you that we're not wrong. The Center Clause is.
Okay.
Was that a pun about centrists?
I don't know what that is.
No, that's one of the things that was folded in to make Santa Claus.
Oh,
the Sinterklaas.
The Sinterklaas. Yeah. My bad. Yeah.
Oh.